Chapter 29:29. Shi Donglai approached the space-time light hole because he wanted to enter the sacred reincarnation world. However, he was very cautious and moved very slowly. He did not want to be suddenly hit by a space-time vortex and die a horrible death. What on earth is this kid doing? Shi Donglai was puzzled when he saw Nye Tian standing motionlessly in the chaotic space. He did not know what Nye Tian was doing. At this time, he looked down at the ground and saw that more than half of the Cloud Buddha mountain range had been swallowed up. All the mountains had disappeared. Above the sea, there were violent currents crashing against each other. It was a mess. Forget about him. I must enter the sacred reincarnation world. Shi Donglai narrowed his eyes and moved closer to the space-time light hole. He felt the dazzling white light shining on his body. His expression became fanatical, as if he was already in the sacred reincarnation world. On the other side, Nye Tian was concentrating on creating cosmic lines. He could not care about himself anymore. He had to create enough cosmic lines as soon as possible to affect the surrounding power of heaven and earth. It's about time. Let's do it, the Ghost Emperor said after a while. Okay. Nye Tian nodded vigorously. Then, he spread his palms, and numerous wisps of cosmic strings gushed out of his palms and spread into the surrounding space. In an instant, the cosmic lines formed a huge net in the sky. It had a radius of tens of thousands of meters. Buzz! Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he suddenly pressed his palm down. A muffled groan echoed out as the power of heaven and earth within a radius of tens of thousands of meters instantly sank under the pressure of the universe net, forming an enormous vortex of heaven and earth. This whirlpool was invisible, but it had a great impact on the surrounding spacetime vortex. Endless spacetime vortex surged over and gathered in the whirlpool. Nye Tian did not dare to press down anymore. He was worried that the cosmic lines would not be able to withstand the pressure and break. He retreated quickly and looked at the spacetime black hole and spacetime light hole on both sides. Actually, what Nye Tian was doing was very easy to understand. If the void in front of him was seen as a surface of water, then the spacetime black hole and spacetime light hole would be balls floating on the surface of the water. On the other hand, Nye Tian had only used the universe lines to construct the universe net. He had forced the water to face downwards, forming a whirlpool. Then, the spacetime black hole and spacetime light hole would naturally move towards the whirlpool and then collide. Nye Tian retreated tens of thousands of meters away, his expression extremely ugly. He discovered that the spacetime black hole and spacetime light hole did not move at all. They were still approaching each other at a snail's pace. Could it be that the heaven and earth vortex created by the cosmic rays is too weak? It can't affect the black hole and the light hole at all. Nye Tian frowned as beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Nye Tian, don't worry. The spacetime black hole and spacetime light hole have already been affected. The Ghost Emperor's voice resounded. Nye Tian nodded, and his gloomy expression eased a little. He glanced down and saw that the entire Cloud Buddha mountain range had been devoured. He could only vaguely see broken mountains. Above the Cloud Buddha sea, huge waves surged into the sky like water dragons. They were going against the sky and spreading towards the sky. But now, he had already done everything he could and could only wait quietly. After a while, the two spacetime black holes and spacetime light holes finally reacted and began to speed up their approach to each other. Rumble! A terrifying roar resounded in the sky, and the surrounding spacetime collapsed even more violently. Wherever the spacetime black hole passed, spacetime collapsed directly. The cosmic rays created by Nye Tian were also devoured one after another. However, the speed of the spacetime black hole was getting faster and faster. On the other side, Shi Donglai had already arrived at the edge of a spacetime light hole. Just as he was about to enter, he suddenly realized that the spacetime light hole's speed had suddenly increased. What's going on? He was stunned for a moment, and his expression immediately darkened. He suddenly turned around and saw the two space-time black holes rolling over from the other side. Damn it! In an instant, he suddenly understood. His face was filled with anger as he roared, "Damn it!" It was only then that he realized that Tian wanted the space-time black hole and space-time light hole to quickly fuse. However, he had already arrived at the edge of the space-time light hole and was only one step away from entering the legendary sacred reincarnation boundary. Under such circumstances, how could he give up? "I must enter the sacred reincarnation boundary," Donglai roared in a low voice. Then, his figure moved and he chased after the space-time light hole. "In order to enter the sacred reincarnation boundary, you don't even want your life?" Tian said coldly as he looked at Donglai's figure. The space-time black hole and space-time light hole were about to fuse together. If Donglai rushed over now, he would be smashed to pieces if he was not careful. Rumble! Rumble! In the void, the rumbling sounds were incessant. Large pieces of space-time were collapsing. It was extremely terrifying. Tian's figure retreated frantically. He relied on the space-time shield around his body to barely maintain his balance. His eyes were fixed on the two space-time black holes and space-time light holes without blinking. Driven by the vortex of heaven and earth, the black holes and space-time light holes rapidly approached each other. 100,000 meters, 50,000 meters, 30,000 meters. The black holes and space-time light holes were about to fuse together. Sacred reincarnation boundary, here I come. At that moment, Donglai had already caught up to one of the space-time light holes. He shouted with a fanatical look in his eyes. Then, his figure moved and he actually disappeared into the space-time light hole. Huh! Tian's eyes narrowed and his expression changed. He did not expect that Donglai would really break through the space-time turbulence and enter the space-time light hole. However, he did not care. Given the current situation, whether Donglai entered the sacred reincarnation boundary or not was no longer important. However, such a demon had actually entered the sacred reincarnation boundary. Tian still felt a little regretful. A person like Donglai should be cut into 1,000 pieces and his bones should be dismembered. In the next moment, the two space-time black holes and space-time light holes were extremely fast. They were about to collide. Tian did not know what would happen next. His figure retreated again. Ah! However, at that moment a scream suddenly sounded. Then, a figure flew out from one of the space-time light holes. Tian could not help but narrow his eyes when he saw the figure clearly. It was actually Donglai. Donglai had entered the space-time light hole, but he did not enter the sacred reincarnation boundary. It seemed that he had been repelled by some kind of power. A mere ant wants to enter the sacred reincarnation boundary? Ridiculous! In the next moment, a thunderous voice rang out from the space-time light hole. Tian's expression stiffened when he heard this voice. He was stunned on the spot. Could it be that another sage would walk out of the space-time light hole? Chapter 29:30. A true Saint Tian stared at the golden giant that had suddenly walked out. His pupils constricted and his face stiffened. The golden giant looked like a normal human, but it was 50 meters tall. Its body shone with a dazzling golden light like the sun in the sky. Most importantly, the golden-bodied giant's body was emitting an extremely vast aura. It was as boundless as the endless starry sky. Tian's current mood could only be described with one word: astonishment. Deep astonishment. He even felt that every drop of blood, every meridian, and every piece of bone in his body was trembling incessantly. Was this the legendary saint? At this moment, the Ghost Emperor's panicked voice suddenly rang out. Tian, retreat. Now. Tian's eyes trembled as he reacted. Wings of the astral soul appeared on his back, and he retreated frantically. Die, mere ant! The golden giant spoke again. His voice was like thunder from the 9 heavens, echoing between the heavens and the earth. His huge hand descended, and a huge golden palm descended from the sky, blasting towards Shi Donglai's figure. Before Shi Donglai could stabilize his body, he suddenly felt the void around him sink. His expression changed to one of extreme terror. In the next moment, he was directly engulfed by the golden palm before he could react. The only pseudo-sage cultivator of the shore of the Bitter Sea, the leader of the Shi family of Cloud Buddha, was dead. Boom! Immediately after, the golden palm fell on the surface of the sea like a towering mountain, stirring up waves that were tens of thousands of meters high. The entire shore of the Bitter Sea shook, as if it was about to be destroyed. Nie Tian was hundreds of thousands of meters away. His body trembled, and was sent flying by the impact of the giant palm. He was sent flying thousands of meters away before he managed to stabilize his body, but he was already covered in blood. He was only affected by the aftershock, but he was unable to withstand the impact. One could imagine how powerful the golden giant was. Is this a saint? Nie Tian's expression calmed down slightly. He stared at the golden giant and said in a daze, "That golden-bodied giant was truly too terrifying. Just a casual palm strike had actually nearly destroyed the entire Sea of Misery horizon." At that moment, the golden body suddenly noticed Nie Tian and was surprised. Then, it laughed loudly and said, "There's another ant." In his eyes, Nie Tian and Shi Donglai were nothing more than ants. Boom! In the next moment, the golden giant actually moved. It took a step forward and rushed towards Nie Tian. The space-time vortexes in the surrounding space attacked his body, but they were directly annihilated by the golden light outside his body. "He wants to kill me!" Nie Tian's pupils shrank as he realized what was going on. However, in front of the golden giant, how could he resist? Boom! However, at that moment, the space behind the golden giant suddenly shook violently. The surrounding space shook. It turned out that a space-time black hole and a space-time light hole had collided. Boom! Terrifying space-time fluctuations surged in all directions like huge ripples. Huh! The golden giant's body froze, and he exclaimed in surprise. Bang! Then, the space-time fluctuations spread and actually left a mark on his body. Even the space-time vortexes could not hurt the golden giant, but the space-time fluctuations after the collision between the space-time black hole and space-time light hole had actually hurt the golden giant. One could imagine how strong the space-time fluctuations were. When Nie Tian saw this scene, his eyes suddenly trembled, and he was extremely shocked. If the space-time fluctuations spread to his body, he would definitely die. In an instant, he reacted, and the wings on his back flapped, and he dived towards the sea below. The space-time fluctuations spread the moment his figure disappeared. If he had been a little later, he would have died on the spot. "Little ant, I'll spare your life." When the golden giant saw Nie Tian dive into the sea, he frowned, turned around, and entered another space-time light hole, and disappeared. If he did not leave now, the space-time light hole would disappear, and he would be trapped in the sacred soul realm forever. Boom! Just as the golden giant disappeared, another space-time black hole and another space-time light hole collided, and another space-time fluctuation appeared, crashing into the space. At this moment, Nie Tian was already in the sea, and he was extremely shocked when he saw the scene in the sky through the layers of seawater. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would never have believed such a scene. In particular, the appearance of the golden giant had left him greatly shaken. Above the sky, space-time was a mess. After the space-time black hole and space-time light hole disappeared for a long time, the collapsed space-time finally began to recover slowly. When Nie Tian walked out of the sea, he looked at the collapsed space-time that was recovering, and finally let out a long breath of turbid air. At this moment, he truly felt the joy of surviving a calamity. After about a few hours, heaven and earth gradually returned to normal, and the sea was no longer turbulent, and it was a boundless deep blue. These two spacetime black holes almost destroyed the entire Cloud Buddha mountain range. Nye Tian looked at the shattered Cloud Buddha mountain range and sighed deeply. The Cloud Buddha mountain range was thousands of miles wide, but it was almost swallowed by two small spacetime black holes. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have believed it. Yes. The Ghost Emperor opened his mouth and said with a smile, if this Emperor was in his normal state, this kind of space-time black hole could be crushed with a flick of my finger. Nye Tian was stunned for a moment, and his heart trembled slightly. It was really hard to imagine how strong the Ghost Emperor was in his peak state. Cher. Nye Tian immediately thought of Cher and the others, and his eyes flashed with a fiery light. Then, his figure moved, flying forward. Boom! At this moment, a broken piece of ground was suddenly hit by a violent force, and a huge abyss appeared. Then, a figure flew out from the abyss. Senior! Nye Tian saw the figure clearly, and he was overjoyed. The person who appeared in front of him was Shirchani. Nye Tian. Shirchani saw Nye Tian, and he was also overjoyed and shouted excitedly. Then, more figures came out from the abyss. The Scarlet Blood Abyss was deep in the sea, and Shirchani was safe and sound hiding inside. Nye Tian's figure moved, and he directly landed outside the abyss. Soon, the figures of Shi Lulan and the others appeared, and after seeing Nye Tian, they were very happy. Then, Fat Cat's figure also appeared, holding the 9 extremes in her hand. After seeing Nye Tian, she chuckled. Nye Tian, you really did not let me down. Have I ever let Lord Chinchilla down? Nye Tian smiled faintly and then asked, is Cher all right? Don't worry. Fat Cat said, and her figure moved, and she jumped onto Nye Tian's shoulder, and said with a smile, I have already placed the little girl into the 9 extremes. She will be able to integrate with the Heavenly Law Sacred Heart in 3 days. At that time, just wait for the surprise. Nye Tian smiled and nodded. He was looking forward to seeing how strong Cher would be after integrating with the Heavenly Law Sacred Heart. Chapter 29:31. 2 terrifying 3 days later, Cloud Buddha Main Hall. Nye Tian, the reason the Cloud Buddha Shi family was able to survive this disaster is all because of your help. Shirchani stood in the newly rebuilt Cloud Buddha Main Hall, solemnly saying to Nye Tian, on behalf of the Cloud Buddha Shi family, this old man thanks you. Senior is too polite, I was forced to save myself. Nye Tian gave a dry laugh, a little embarrassed. In truth, if Shirchani had not told him that the opening of the Scarlet Blood Road could threaten the entire Sacred Soul domain, he really might not have helped. No matter what, you are the great benefactor of the Cloud Buddha Shi family. My Cloud Buddha Shi family will always remember this, Shirchani said solemnly. Even at this time, Shirchani still could not understand how Nye Tian had done what he thought was impossible. He had to admit that Nye Tian was indeed the most monstrous person he had ever seen, monstrous to the point of being a little terrifying. In his view, Nye Tian's monstrous talent was not only in talent, but also in temperament, perseverance, and the ability to deal with things. Senior is too serious. Nye Tian smiled faintly. Shirchani nodded slightly in appreciation. In his view, Nye Tian had not only saved the Cloud Buddha Shi family, but he had also saved the Sea of Bitterness and the entire Sacred Soul domain. Nye Tian's calmness at this time made him even more surprised. Great Elder, the things that Sir Nye Tian wants have been prepared. At this time, a Shi family cultivator appeared, bowing deeply to Nye Tian and Shirchani, speaking in an extremely respectful manner. He handed over a space ring to Shirchani. Very good. Shirchani smiled faintly, then looked at Nye Tian. Thank you. Nye Tian was not polite. After receiving the spatial ring, he probed it with his mind and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. Inside the spatial ring was the Manjasaka he needed. He had thought that the entire Cloud Buddha mountain range had been destroyed and that Manjasaka was gone. Who could have guessed that there were still a lot of Manjasaka in the Sher family? Nietian didn't want much, just a few hundred stalks. As the benefactor of the Sher family, Sher Chani naturally would not be stingy with a few hundred Manjasaka. Nietian, are you leaving now? Sher Chan nodded and looked at Nietian. Yes. Nietian smiled and said, I still have to save people, so I really can't stay any longer. Since that's the case, this old man will not force you to stay. Sher Chani smiled faintly, then his eyes flashed and he took out the Great Wish Bodhi bead. Senior, this is. Nietian was stunned for a moment, and his face was full of astonishment. Could it be that Sher Chani wanted to return the Great Wish Bodhi beads to Huairu? Nietian, this string of Buddhist beads is for you. Sher Chani handed over the Buddhist beads and faintly smiled. For me. Nietian was stunned for a moment, but he immediately reacted and waved his hand. Senior, this Buddhist bead is a sacred object of the Sher family. It is too precious, I can't accept it. You saved the entire Sher family, there is no need to feel ashamed to accept a string of Buddhist beads. Sher Chani was very persistent and said with a smile, You can give it to someone else. Someone else? Nietian was stunned, a puzzled expression on his face. For example, the girl next to you called Sher Chani said with a strange smile. Sher. Nietian was stunned for a moment, and the confusion on his face deepened. So it turned out that Sher Chani wanted to give the Great Wish Bodhi beads to Sher in a roundabout way. But why was he doing this? Nietian, that girl Sher is from the ancient Ming race, right? Sher Chani saw the confusion in Nietian's heart and bitterly smiled, saying, If this old man is not wrong, she should be a kind body born from the heaven-punishing demon heart, right? Yes. Nietian swallowed and nodded. It turned out that Sher Chani had already seen through Nietian's identity. Ancestor, I should have told you that the Netherworld Emperor of the ancient Ming race once had an emotional entanglement with a girl from my Sher family. Sher Chani nodded and said, This old man feels that the Great Wish Bodhi beads should be placed on the body of the heaven-punishing demon heart. Perhaps she will have a use for it in the future. Saying this, Sher Chani once again handed the Buddhist beads to Nietian. Nietian had a puzzled expression as he took the Buddhist beads. He could see that Sher Chani seemed to have something to say, but he didn't plan on saying it. He couldn't force it, so he could only leave it at that. Next, Nietian didn't waste any time. After bidding farewell to Sher Chani, he directly returned to the small courtyard he was temporarily living in and prepared to leave immediately. Sher. As soon as he entered the small courtyard, he saw a familiar figure. It was Sher. For the past 3 days, Sher had been under the care of the fat cat as she merged with the heavenly Tao Sacred Heart. Now, she finally woke up. Seeing Sher again, Nietian was very happy. His eyes couldn't help but twinkle as he looked at her from head to toe. At this time, Sher's eyes were even clearer than before. She even looked younger, and the aura of a young girl was more intense. Moreover, Sher's facial features were more exquisite, and her skin was soft and delicate. She was so beautiful that it could move one's soul. But what was strange was that Nietian didn't feel the slightest aura from Sher's body. At first, he thought that Sher was deliberately restraining her aura. But when his divine sense probed more carefully, he still didn't feel any aura fluctuations from Sher's body. Sher has merged with the heavenly Tao Sacred Heart and become an ordinary person? Nietian's face stiffened as he thought to himself. Could this be the surprise that the fat cat had mentioned to Nietian? Logically speaking, after Sher merged with the heavenly Tao Sacred Heart and absorbed the restriction wall, her strength should be very strong. But now, why wasn't there any aura fluctuations? Nietian, is this a pleasant surprise? Fat Cat looked at Nietian and asked with a proud smile. Fat, what's going on? Nietian's face was ugly as he asked in shock. He absolutely didn't believe that Sher would lose all her strength after merging with the heavenly Tao Sacred Heart. Don't worry, La Shui's strength is still there, and she's definitely stronger than you expected. Fat Cat, of course, knew what Nye Tian was thinking. It chuckled and said, "It's just that after she merged with the Heavenly Tao Sacred Heart, the Heavenly Tao Sacred Heart completely concealed her aura, so even a sage might not be able to sense her strength." When Nye Tian heard Fat Cat's words, he was stunned and couldn't speak for a long time. He never imagined that Cher's merging with the Heavenly Tao Sacred Heart would have such an effect. Many martial artists would deliberately restrain their aura to hide their strength. But Cher didn't have any aura at all, so no one would be able to see through this method of concealing her strength. Then, what's Cher's strength now? Then, Nye Tian's eyes flickered as he asked with an expectant look. "Why don't you guess?" Fat Cat chuckled and asked in reply. "Third Order Half-Saint." The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched as he said. Before merging with the Heavenly Tao Sacred Heart, Cher was at the peak of the immortal realm, so Nye Tian felt that after merging with the Heavenly Tao Sacred Heart, Cher would at least break through to the Half-Saint realm. Moreover, she had also absorbed the restriction wall, so he guessed that she should be at the Third Order Half-Saint realm. No. Fat Cat shook its fat head and raised its brows. "It's higher than what you said." Fourth Order Half-Saint? Nye Tian was stunned and shocked. "Still higher." Fat Cat shook its head again with a proud expression. "Fifth grade." Nye Tian's eyes went wide as he exclaimed, "Fifth grade! Ninth Order!" The Fat Cat shook its head for the third time and spat out a word. "Ninth Order Half-Saint." Nye Tian's eyes widened and his face turned into stone. How could he have imagined that Cher would directly become a Ninth Order Half-Saint after merging with the Heavenly Tao Sacred Heart? This was too terrifying. Chapter 2932. A Great Secret. What? When Nye Tian heard Little Fat Cat's last two words, his eyes narrowed and his face froze as he let out a strange cry. He simply could not believe his ears, thinking that he had misheard. Everyone else was just like Nye Tian, staring blankly at Fat Cat and Cher. "Didn't you hear me?" Fat Cat had expected the reaction from Nye Tian and the others, and chuckled smugly. "Then I'll say it again. The Schwell-ass is now a rank 9 demi-saint." As if fearing that the others would not believe it, Fat Cat emphasized the last two words. "Rank 9. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed as he gulped and exclaimed in shock, "Demi-saint." This time, he did not mishear, and he heard it very clearly. Fat Cat said rank 9 demi-saint. Rank 9 demi-saint. Everyone else's faces were filled with disbelief, and all of them were petrified. Nye Tian would never have dreamed that Cher's ability would reach rank 9 demi-saint after fusing with the Heavenly Sacred Heart. One should know that she was a rank 9 demi-saint. That level of ability was not much in the sacred spirit domain, but it was too frightening when it appeared in Cher's body. 3 days ago, Cher only had the ability of a god pinnacle. 3 days. In just 3 days, Cher had directly risen to rank 9 demi-saint. That was simply insane. Who would have believed such a thing if they had not seen it with their own eyes? Just how powerful was the Heavenly Sacred Heart? Even if ordinary martial artists had fused with the legacies of a true saint, their ability would never have such an explosive rise. Nye Tian had thought that he had overestimated her by guessing that she was a rank 4 or a rank 5 demi-saint, and never would he have thought that he had greatly underestimated her. "Nye Tian, do you find it unbelievable?" Fat Cat looked at the stunned Nye Tian and chuckled. He seemed to enjoy Nye Tian's shocked expression. Nye Tian finally responded, nodding his head with an infatuated expression. Not only did he find it inconceivable, it was simply inconceivable. "Cher, have you really become a demi-saint?" After a while, Nye Tian finally calmed down a little, but he still didn't believe it. He looked at Cher and asked. "That's right." Cher giggled and nodded her little head with an innocent look on her face. Nye Tian sucked in a breath of cold air. It was only after a long while that he finally believed it. At this moment, he felt that he had suffered a psychological blow. To think that he had gone through innumerable hardships and walked out from the brink of death time and time again to finally possess the strength of a third-grade half-saint. Cher, on the other hand, had casually fused with a heavenly law sacred heart, and her strength had directly thrown him 800 times over. Truly, comparing oneself to others was infuriating. Still, it was fortunate that such a thing had happened to Cher. Nye Tian would have been even more upset if it had happened to someone else. Although he didn't really care about talent or whatnot, such a disparity was simply a blow to him. Phew! Exhaling deeply, Nye Tian's expression relaxed quite a bit. After calming down, he looked at Fat Cat and asked, "Fat, Cher's strength has improved so much. Won't there be a problem?" He had never seen anyone improve their strength so quickly. Moreover, martial artists paid a lot of attention to the foundation of martial arts, which was why he was a little worried that such a sudden increase in strength might not be a good thing for Cher. If it were an ordinary martial artist, there would definitely be a problem if their strength improved at such a speed. Fat Cat's eyes flickered slightly before he looked at Cher and said, "But it won't be a problem for the Shui lass." "Why?" Nye Tian was taken aback for a moment and asked in surprise. The Shui lass was born from the heaven-punishing demon heart, so her body has the heaven-punishing demon chi. Fat Cat's figure flickered and he returned to the origin fetus space, as if he didn't want others to hear his words. But she has the heaven-punishing benevolent physique, so her body also gave birth to the tear of the princess. More importantly, she has the 3 lives examining heavenly Tao soul lattice. Perhaps this is the real reason why the heavenly law sacred heart recognized her as its master. The heavenly law sacred heart is a miracle of heaven and earth. Since it has recognized the Shui lass as its master, it will not cause any harm to her martial body. Therefore, the sudden increase in Shui lass strength is not a problem. Nye Tian listened to Fat Cat's words and nodded slightly. He felt a lot more at ease and said, "It's good that there's no problem." However, at this moment, a strange light flashed in Fat Cat's eyes. His face even looked a little ugly, as if he was worried about something. In fact, there were some things that Fat Cat didn't tell Nye Tian. "Nye Tian, I'm afraid that Shui lass background is far more complicated than what we see now. I'm worried that the tear of the princess was deliberately left in the heaven-punishing demon's heart by someone else." Fat Cat sighed inwardly and the corners of his mouth curled into a bitter smile. Fat Cat also had doubts about Cher's sudden increase in strength. Moreover, when he was helping Cher merge with the heavenly law sacred heart, he felt that the tear of the princess contained a strange aura. This aura definitely didn't come from a domain. Could only come from the holy world. Fat Cat guessed that there was definitely a big secret behind Cher's back. However, he didn't tell Nye Tian about this because he felt that with Nye Tian's current strength, it would be useless for him to know this. It would only add to his worries. One day, when Nye Tian's strength was strong enough, some secrets would naturally be revealed. For now, Nye Tian should focus on what was in front of him. "Cher, let's go." Nye Tian smiled faintly and didn't say anything else. He prepared to immediately leave the Sea of Bitterness and return to Saint Soul Academy. Then he would ask Hua Iru to help him make arrangements to return to the 9 regions. Then, they didn't stay and prepared to leave immediately. Nye Tian. But at this moment, a voice rang out and Shirchani's figure appeared. "Senior, what happened?" Nye Tian saw Shirchani. The latter had a strange expression on his face. He seemed to be in a hurry, as if something big had happened. Shirchani walked over, followed by Wei Kong and Shirlulan. "Nye Tian, I'm afraid that something big is going to happen to the Saint Soul region." Shirchani's figure came over in 3 steps. His face was weathered by the vicissitudes of life, and he looked very solemn. "Something big? What big thing?" Nye Tian couldn't help but ask when he saw Shirchani's expression. "A big thing that can affect the future development of the Saint Soul region." Sher Chani's eyes trembled and his expression was extremely serious. Nye Tian's brows furrowed. His curiosity was even greater. Something that could make Sher Chani so flustered was definitely not a small matter. But to say that it could affect the future development of the Saint Soul region, Nye Tian really didn't believe it. Nye Tian, do you know that the Saint Soul region is one of the 3 sacred regions? Sher Chani could see that Nye Tian was suspicious of his words. His murky eyes released a sharp light as he asked in a low voice. I know. Nye Tian nodded slightly. Before he entered the Saint Soul region, he already knew that the Saint Soul region was one of the 3 sacred regions. Then do you know why? Sher Chani's eyes trembled again as he asked. Because a sacred world seed has appeared in the Saint Soul region, Nye Tian said with a faint smile. Yes. Sher Chani nodded, a strange smile on his face. Chapter 29:33. A storm brewing. Sher Chani's sudden mention of a holy world seed made Nye Tian have a guess. A second holy world seed had appeared in the Holy Soul region. Although this guess didn't sound very likely, Nye Tian felt that it was very likely. When Sher Chani heard Nye Tian's words, his old eyes suddenly trembled and flashed with a strange light. He was obviously very surprised and then nodded heavily. This. Nye Tian saw Sher Chani's reaction and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He was speechless for a long time. He had actually guessed correctly. Another holy world seed had appeared in the Holy Soul region. How is this possible? At the same time, Fat Cat and the Ghost Emperor's voices sounded at the same time. They were obviously extremely shocked and aghast. Cher and the others had calm expressions because they didn't know what a holy world seed was. Senior, is what you said true? After a full 10 seconds, Nye Tian finally reacted, but he still didn't believe it and asked with trembling eyes. How could this old man joke about this kind of thing? Sher Chani's expression was solemn and solemn. This. The corners of Nye Tian's mouth twitched, and he said in a trembling voice, This is really surprising. Although he had guessed this result, when he actually confirmed it, he was still shocked. A holy world seed, that was a holy world seed. No wonder Sher Chani said that this matter would affect the future development of the Holy Soul region. A holy world seed could make the Holy Soul region grow into a holy world over time, so the appearance of a second holy world seed would definitely accelerate the growth of the Holy Soul region. Most importantly, the appearance of a second holy world seed was bound to set off a bloody storm in the Holy Soul region. Nye Tian had used the holy qi liquid before. That thing's effect on a cultivator was too great. With the appearance of a holy world seed, all the forces in the Holy Soul region, big or small, wanted to obtain it. Nye Tian, a second holy world seed, has appeared in the Holy Soul region. I'm afraid it will be a storm, Sher Chani said solemnly. He seemed to have thought of something. Senior, are you saying that the major forces of the Holy Soul region will start a war over this holy world seed? Nye Tian's eyes narrowed as he asked cautiously. Not will, but will definitely. Sher Chan's eyes narrowed slightly. He nodded and said, when the first sacred world seed appeared, who knows how many forces fought a bloody battle for control of the sacred world seed? That incident led to a complete reshuffle of the major forces of the Sacred Soul region. But in the end, it wasn't the Sacred Soul region that controlled the Sacred World Seed. Sher Chani couldn't help but bitterly smile, a helpless expression on his face. Nye Tian was taken aback. He asked, which force is in control of the Sacred World Seed right now? He was very curious. The major forces of the Sacred Soul region fought to the death for the Holy World Seed, but the one who controlled the Holy World Seed in the end was not a force of the Sacred Soul region. This was too ridiculous. The Myriad Domains Guild. Sher Chani's eyes darkened slightly. The Myriad Domains Guild. Hearing these words, Nye Tian furrowed his brows. He was extremely surprised. He didn't expect that the force in control of the Sacred Soul Region's Holy World Seed was actually the Myriad Domains Guild. He had heard of the Myriad Domains Guild countless times, and he had even come into contact with Feng Qi and the others. However, he didn't know much about the Myriad Domains Guild. He only knew that it was a behemoth in the Myriad Domains. Fortunately, the space-time structure of the 9 territories was special. Otherwise, for a powerful realm like the Sacred Soul Region, anyone who entered the 9 territories would be a peak supreme existence. It was also because of the special location of the 9 territories and the special space-time structure that even a behemoth like the Myriad Domains Guild didn't have much control over the 9 territories. At this moment, Nie Tian was very curious about the position of the Myriad Domains Guild in the entire Myriad Domains. Senior, is the Myriad Domains Guild the number 1 force in the Myriad Domains? Nie Tian couldn't contain his curiosity, and asked in a deep voice. The Myriad Domains Guild? Shirchani looked at Nie Tian and couldn't help but laugh. The Myriad Domains Guild is one of the strongest forces in the Myriad Domains Guild, but it's a bit of a stretch to say that it's the number 1 force. Apart from the hidden forces of the Myriad Domains, there are a few forces on the surface that aren't any weaker than the Myriad Domains Guild. When Nie Tian heard Shirchani's words, his eyes couldn't help but sink slightly. He then asked, Senior, what is the position of the Feng family in the Myriad Domains Guild? The Feng family. When Shirchani heard Nie Tian ask about the Feng family, his expression changed slightly. He then laughed and said, In my early years, this old man carried out a family mission and had dealings with the Feng family. The Feng family's ancestor is one of the few old monsters in the Myriad Domains Guild. He can be considered one of the strongest people in the Myriad Domains Guild. So the Feng family's position in the Myriad Domains Guild is very high, but to what extent, this old man doesn't know. So that's how it is. Nie Tian nodded and didn't continue asking. Shirchani had lived at the edge of the Sea of Bitterness for a long time, so he probably didn't know much about the Myriad Domains Guild. The appearance of a second Sacred World Seed in the Holy Soul region would definitely alarm the Holy Soul Academy. Nie Tian was prepared to wait until he returned to the Holy Soul Academy before asking Hua Iru everything. Nie Tian, the place where the second Sacred World Seed appeared, is in the Divine Wind Mountain Range. It's not too far from the edge of the Sea of Bitterness. This old man is prepared to let Wei Kong and Lu Lan go take a look. Do you want to go with them and join in the fun? Shirchani looked at Nie Tian and asked with a smile. That's fine. Nie Tian thought for a moment, then nodded in agreement. He had already obtained Manjusaka, so the following matters were much simpler, so he wasn't in a hurry. Moreover, the Divine Wind Mountain Range was not far from the edge of the Sea of Bitterness. It was a good opportunity to see what kind of mysterious existence the legendary Sacred World Seed was. Actually, Nie Tian was thinking about the Divine Qi liquid. If he could obtain some of it in the Divine Wind Mountain Range, that would be great. What he desired the most now was to increase his strength, and the Divine Qi liquid was the best thing to increase his strength. All right, since you've agreed, you can set off now. Shirchani smiled faintly, then turned to look at Wei Kong and said, You must protect your junior sister. If you encounter any problems, be more patient, understand? Understood. Wei Kong nodded heavily. After all, the Shi family was no longer the Shi family that controlled the Holy Soul region millions of years ago. After leaving the edge of the Sea of Bitterness, the Shi family was at most a second-rate force in the Holy Soul region. The Shi family had suffered a great change, and Shirchani really couldn't leave. Otherwise, he would also want to see the legendary Sacred World Seed. Nie Tian left the Sea Dragon King behind, and had Shirchani arrange for someone to send him back to the Sea Dragon Island. Then, without further delay, he directly left. Sigh, Sacred World Seed. Shirchani looked in the direction where Nie Tian and the others disappeared, but his expression was not good. He let out a long sigh and said, A storm is coming. Originally, the Holy Soul region was quite peaceful, but the appearance of the second sacred world seed was bound to break this peace. Chapter 29:34. Chapter 299. Chapter 299 Don T. Provoke Meth Arctic Snow Mountain was the largest ice mountain in the Sacred Spirit region. It stretched for tens of thousands of miles, and was covered in ice and snow all year round. The wind and snow were like knives, and the weather was extremely harsh. The Arctic Snow Mountain was originally a deserted place, but because of the appearance of the sacred world seed, this ancient snow mountain instantly became the most lively place in the entire Sacred Spirit region. At this time, outside the Arctic Snow Mountain, there were already several small cities. Around the snow mountain, there were many huge tents, like ferocious beasts lying on the ground, eyeing the Arctic Snow Mountain. In the distant sky above the Arctic Snow Mountain, several figures flew past, heading towards the Arctic Snow Mountain. They were very fast, arriving in the sky above the small cities in an instant. These figures were none other than Nye Tian and the others. "Brother Nye, look at the ice mountain in front. That's the Arctic Snow Mountain." Wei Kong pointed at the ice mountain in front and said to Nye Tian, "I didn't expect the Arctic Snow Mountain to be so vast." Nye Tian nodded slightly, his eyes flashing with surprise. He originally thought that the Arctic Snow Mountain was just a glacier. He didn't expect it to be so vast. As far as the eye could see, he couldn't see the end of it. "Yes." Wei Kong nodded. "The Arctic Snow Mountain is 50,000 miles long. Legend has it that in ancient times there were glaciers here. Later, the earth split and formed this magnificent snow mountain." Nye Tian smiled faintly. "I wonder how big the sacred world seed is and where it is in the snow mountain. I haven't seen the sacred world seed either. But the sacred world seed is a saint energy whirlpool. Even if it isn't big, its aura is very strong. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been discovered." "Yes." Nye Tian nodded, then looked at Xiaoya. "The weather here is harsh. If you can't stand it, you can enter the 9 superbs." Although Nye Tian and the others hadn't entered the ice mountain yet, the surrounding environment was already very harsh. Snow fluttered and the wind was like knives. Weaker cultivators really couldn't stand this kind of environment. Xiaoya looked up at Cher and shook her head. Clearly, she didn't want to enter the 9 superbs. Nye Tian smiled and didn't say anything else. With Cher by her side, Xiaoya would be fine. After all, Cher was now a demi-saint, and not even Nye Tian would be a match for Cher. By Nye Tian's estimation, Cher's talent as a rank 9 demi-saint would be enough to fight against weaker pseudo-saints. On the other hand, Nye Tian was only a rank 3 half-saint, and could only fight a rank 5 demi-saint at his peak. "Brother Nye, let's enter the ice mountain directly." Wei Kong looked at the Arctic ice mountain with a fiery gaze and smiled. At the moment, Wei Kong had not only recovered, but his ability had also risen to the level of a demi-saint. Previously in the Scarlet Blood Abyss, when the ball of light exploded, it released a huge amount of energy. Wei Kong used this energy to recover from his injuries and increase his strength. Shi Liulan's ability had improved as well, and she was now a second-stage demi-saint. Nye Tian was outside the abyss at the time and missed the best time to absorb the energy, which was why his ability remained as a third-stage demi-saint. However, he could already feel the signs of a breakthrough, and he would soon ascend to a fourth-stage demi-saint. Although such an ascension was slow, it was still a step closer to becoming a true elite. "All right." Nye Tian nodded. He was eager to see the sacred realm seed himself. With a flash, they sped up and headed toward the Arctic ice mountain. "Who goes there?" But it was then that a violent voice resounded from the skies. Boom! In the next moment, a violent force descended from the sky, piercing through the air with incomparable sharpness, and directly bombarded Nye Tian and the others. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed, and his expression darkened. "Huh!" It was then that Wei Kang's expression darkened. The 7-night demonic dragon slash appeared in his hand, and he swung his blade at it. The shadow of the blade burst out and shattered the giant palm in the air. Huh? Not bad. In the next instant, a mocking voice rang out as a silhouette appeared, glaring at Wei Kong with a sinister look in his eyes. Who are you? Why did you attack us? Wei Kang's eyes darkened, and he retracted his aura. He remembered what Shi Chani told him before he left, so he didn't want to cause trouble. My name is Mu Fu, a member of the Mu family. The newcomer's eyes flashed with a strange light, and he raised his eyebrows. His posture was extremely provocative. Mu family! Nie Tian and Wei Kong were stunned at the same time. They had never heard of the Mu family. How bold of you to trespass the Arctic snow mountain. Don't you know that a sacred world seed has appeared in the Arctic snow mountain? They've already sealed off the mountain. Trash like you don't have the right to enter the mountain. Mu Fu smiled coldly, his attitude very arrogant. Let's go. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and without saying anything, he turned around and prepared to leave. He didn't want to waste time on such an idiot. Wei Kong nodded and also turned to leave. How dare you? However, at this moment, Mu Fu suddenly growled and attacked again. He slammed his palm down fiercely, and the shadow of the palm tore through the air and blasted towards Nie Tian and the others. Bang! Wei Kang's face darkened, and he turned around and slashed with his blade, shattering the shadow of the palm in the air. Bang! In the next moment, there was a dull sound in the air, and Mu Fu's figure was pushed back hundreds of meters by the violent blade will. You! After he stabilized himself, his face was full of shock, and he wanted to say something, but he spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face was as white as paper. He clearly didn't expect Wei Kong to be so strong. Don't provoke me again. Wei Kong suddenly turned around, and his eyes were cold as he said coldly. Mu Fu's face trembled, and his face was full of fear. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth curled up and he laughed. This Mu Fu was really an idiot. He only had the cultivation of a demi-saint, and yet he dared to be so arrogant. If Wei Kong hadn't shown mercy just now, Mu Fu would have been a corpse. Let's go. Wei Kong no longer paid attention to Mu Fu, and with a low voice, he turned around and left. You want to leave after beating up a member of the Mu family? But at that moment, a low murderous voice suddenly resounded in the void, and it was extremely cold and filled with a chilling intent. Then, a white-robed figure appeared and stood in the void, and his eyes were surging with undisguised killing intent. 19th Young Master! Mu Fu shouted in surprise when he saw the white-robed figure, as if he had found a life-saving straw. Nie Tian frowned slightly, and he could not help but stare at the white-robed figure. The white-robed man had a handsome and delicate appearance, but the killing intent in his eyes made him look very cold. Moreover, the white-robed man looked very young, but his strength was actually a demi-saint. With such cultivation and such a young age, he could be considered a monster-class genius. Judging from Mu Fu's attitude towards the white-robed man, the latter's status was obviously very high. Chapter 29:35. Surprised? Who are you? Wei Kong turned to look at the man in white and asked coldly. The 19th Young Master of the Mu family, Mu Rongjio. Mu Rongjio's eyes darkened and the killing intent in his eyes intensified. What do you want? Wei Kang's eyes narrowed and his expression didn't change. You injured someone from the Mu family. Do you want to leave just like that? Mu Rongjio smiled coldly and said, If this gets out, where will the dignity of the Mu family be? Nie Tian frowned and his face darkened. Mu Fu and Mu Rongjio kept emphasizing the Mu family. He couldn't help but wonder what kind of force the Mu family was. Was it really that powerful? And Mu Rongjio's attitude at this time was very domineering. It was as if he was the most powerful person in the world. I didn't kill him. I have already shown mercy. Wei Kang's eyes darkened and he responded coldly. He wasn't being arrogant. He was just telling the truth. Mu Fu's strength was not even worth mentioning in front of him. If he wanted to kill someone, Mu Fu would have died even if he had 100 lives. He didn't kill because he remembered Shi Chani's words. If he exchanged his strength with Mu Fu would definitely kill him. So he was already very merciful by only injuring Mu Fu. Oh! Murong Jiu chuckled and said with a playful expression, "In that case, I should thank you." Wei Kong wanted to say something but was stopped by Nie Tian, who said lightly, "Brother Wei, don't worry about him. Let's go." "Go. Do you think you can leave?" However, before he finished speaking, Murong Jiu let out a low roar and his figure moved. He thrust out his palm and the air suddenly shook. Suddenly, a giant palm of ice and snow appeared and pressed down on Wei Kong. Wei Kang's eyes narrowed and his expression changed. He didn't expect Murong Jiu's strength to be so strong. It was far beyond his expectations. And Murong Jiu's palm was very sudden and without warning. In an instant, the power in his body exploded to the extreme. It was obvious that he had been accumulating power for a long time. Oh no! At this moment, the fat cat suddenly cried out in panic. When Nie Tian sensed the aura around Murong Jiu, his gaze trembled and he was shocked. He did not expect that Murong Jiu was actually an ice attribute martial artist. In this sky full of ice and snow, Murong Jiu's strength increased tremendously. Demonic Dragon Roar. At this moment, Wei Kong reacted in an instant. He slashed out with the 7-Night Demonic Dragon slash in his hand. The saber will surged wildly, and the shadow of the Demonic Dragon saber appeared, pressing forward with great force. Boom! In the next moment, there was a loud noise in the air. The shadow of the Demonic Dragon saber and the giant ice palm collided. The surrounding world suddenly trembled, and a huge violent force drove the ice and snow, turning it into sharp ice blades that filled the sky, surging in all directions. Cultivators below Half-Sage would not be able to withstand such power. Woo! Behind Nie Tian, Xiao Ye's voice sounded. She was obviously frightened. He turned around abruptly and saw that Cher was protecting Xiao Ye behind her. Boom! At this moment, the shadow of the demonic dragon saber in the air suddenly sank, and then directly exploded into pieces, the saber will filling the air. At the same time, Wei Kang's body trembled, and he was directly sent flying. Senior brother! Shi Liulan's beautiful eyes trembled when she saw that, and she cried out in shock. Wei Kang's figure retreated several thousand meters before he finally steadied himself, but his body was covered in blood, and he was gravely injured. Senior brother, are you all right? Shi Liulan moved to Wei Kang's side and asked anxiously. I'm fine. Although Wei Kong said that he was fine, his face was extremely pale. He had suffered a direct hit from the giant ice palm, and he was gravely injured. Despicable! Nie Tian frowned and growled. This Murong Jiu was truly shameless. On the surface, he seemed to be negotiating with Wei Kong, but in reality, he was secretly accumulating his strength before making a sudden move. More importantly, Murong Jiu was an ice attribute martial artist, and his combat ability had been greatly improved in an environment like the Arctic snow mountain. Both he and Wei Kong were stage 7 demi-saints, and his talent should be below Wei Kang's. Under normal circumstances, Wei Kong would have a higher chance of winning. However, in the current environment, it would be difficult for Wei Kong to defeat Murong Jiu head-on, let alone being ambushed by the latter. One had to admit that Murong Jiu was a scheming person. 19th Young Master, you are truly amazing. Mu Fu saw that Wei Kong was gravely injured, and he chuckled and said flatteringly, "Kill that silver-haired brat and leave the other girls alive," Murong Jiu said with a cold smile, and his eyes glanced at Cher and Xiao Ye with a lustful glint. "I understand." Mu Fu smiled wretchedly. Of course, he understood what Murong Jiu meant. Murong Jiu had his eyes on Cher and the others. "Sorry, little silver-haired." Mu Fu chuckled and his figure moved. In midair, he slammed his palm down at Nie Tian. "You're courting death." Nie Tian's expression darkened, and the starry heavenly slash appeared in his hand. Sword will surged around him, and he slashed with his sword, the shadow of the sword whistling. Boom! In the next instant, the shadow of the sword fell, and before Mu Fu could react, he was engulfed by the shadow of the sword, leaving nothing behind. Huh! The unexpected scene made Murong Jio's expression darken, and he exclaimed in surprise. He clearly did not expect that Mu Fu would be killed instantly when he attacked Nie Tian. He had already noticed that Nie Tian only had the strength of a third-stage half-saint. A third-stage half-saint killed a first-stage demi-saint with a single strike. Murong Jio even suspected that he was seeing things. Surprised, Nie Tian looked at Murong Jio and smiled cold. Humph! Murong Jio's eyes trembled for a moment, and then he sneered with a chilling gaze. It seems that I have encountered a rare genius. But you are very unlucky because I like killing geniuses. As he spoke, his figure moved and he took a step forward. The icy aura around him instantly became cold and sharp. Outside his body there were actually many ice blades. Die! In the next moment, Murong Jio roared. An ice vortex appeared on his palm, and he slammed it at Nie Tian. Boom! The ice vortex suddenly exploded in the air, and instantly turned into a giant ice cone that was 10,000 meters long, pressing down on the void and attacking wildly. Crack, crack, crack. Wherever the giant ice cone passed, the space was immediately frozen, and the cold aura was as sharp as killing intent. Whoosh! However, at that moment, the void suddenly trembled, and a crimson sword ray appeared, piercing through the air, and directly collided with the giant ice cone. Crack, crack, crack. The crimson sword ray looked ordinary, and there was not even a hint of momentum, but it pierced through the giant ice cone. From afar, the giant ice cone flashed with a red light and then collapsed. The bizarre scene made Murong Jio's eyes tremble, and his expression was extremely shocked. His mouth was wide open, but he could not make a sound. Whoosh! In the next moment, the crimson sword ray pierced through the ice cone and whizzed straight at Murong Jio. Chapter 2936. I'm angry. Murong Jio looked at the sharp sword radiance in the air with extreme fear in his eyes. The fear in his heart was perfectly written on his face. Pfft! In the next instant, the sword radiance whizzed out and pierced through Murong Jio's shoulder. Blood gushed out and dyed half of Murong Jio's body red. Ah! As blood gushed out, Murong Jio was overjoyed and even laughed out loud. He instantly felt that he was still alive and not dead. That sword radiance just now was so terrifying that it could have killed him instantly. But the sword radiance had only pierced through his shoulder, and nothing more. It was obvious that the person who had attacked him had only intended to hurt him, not kill him. Cher, you're still too soft-hearted. Nie Tian looked at Cher and could not help but smile bitterly. The person who had attacked just now was none other than Cher. She had not used her full strength at all. It was merely a casual attack. But it was that casual attack that had almost killed Murong Jio. The moment the sword radiance appeared, Nie Tian sensed the sword will aura around Cher. Only then did he realize that Cher was not only a rank 9 demi-saint, but her sword mastery had also reached the level of transcendent sword soul. It seemed that Nie Tian had still underestimated Cher's combat ability. Apart from possessing the meridian of 3 lives, Cher was also of the Wan Jian bloodline. Cher Yu. On the other side, Shi Lulan was completely stunned. Her delicate face was frozen, and the shock in her heart was written all over her face. Beside her, Wei Kong was also petrified. He looked at Cher with surprise and unfamiliarity, as if he was looking at someone else. They had never thought that Cher, who had been quiet all this time, would have such monstrous strength. The two of them could not even imagine what level Cher had reached at the moment. Right now, Shui was just standing there. There was no aura emanating from her at all. She was no different from an ordinary mortal. After a long while, Murong Jio finally reacted. His horrified expression eased a little, but the way he looked at Cher was filled with fear. He couldn't believe it. How could a teenage girl be able to unleash such a terrifying sword light? If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would never have believed that such a martial artist existed in the world. Leave. Murongjio's face was filled with fear. He said in his heart and turned to leave. Wait. However, at this moment, Shui Er's voice rang out. It sounded very gentle, sweet, and harmless. However, when the calm voice reached Murongjio's ears, it was like a clap of thunder from the 9 heavens, causing his body to freeze in midair. He turned around. His whole body was drenched in cold sweat. He didn't dare to look up at Cher. He just stood there with his head down. When you attacked just now, you scared little sister Xiaoya. I'm very angry. Cher's eyes were indifferent as she frowned. Slap. As soon as she finished speaking, Murongjio suddenly raised his head and slapped himself decisively. The sound of the slap was loud and clear. Huh! Cher's beautiful eyes flickered. She seemed to be puzzled by Murongjio's behavior. Slap. 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 Murongjio thought that Cher was dissatisfied. He made up his mind and slapped himself continuously. His face instantly swelled up like a pig's head. You! Cher looked at the scene before her in confusion. She had no idea what Murongjio was doing. Miss, are you still not satisfied? After a while, the slapping finally stopped. Murongjio's face was already a mess of flesh and blood. His eyes were only left with a line. He looked at Cher pitifully and asked, Satisfied? Satisfied with what? Cher was stunned and even more puzzled. Do you want me to destroy my own vitality meridians? Murongjio's eyes flickered as he exclaimed. He thought that Cher was still dissatisfied and wanted to force him to destroy his own vitality meridians. You really want to destroy your own vitality meridians? Cher's eyes flickered as she asked in shock. She felt that she had met an idiot. She did not say anything and Murongjio slapped himself. What else could he be if he was not an idiot? Murongjio was shocked. He thought that Cher really wanted him to destroy his own vitality meridians. He wanted to cry but no tears came out. He was the direct descendant of the Mu family and a martial arts genius. If he destroyed his own vitality meridians, he would become a useless person in the future. If you insist on destroying your own vitality meridians, I won't stop you. Do it. Cher pursed her lips and spread her arms. She said helplessly, This. Murongjio's heart sank and he was speechless. He could not understand Cher's reaction. If Cher did not force him, why would he have the idea of destroying his own vitality meridians? Was he not an idiot? He definitely would not have thought that he was an idiot in Cher's eyes. Scram, Nie Tian said cold as he looked at Murongjio with a dark gaze. He did not want to waste time, so he asked Murongjio to scram. He still did not know what kind of force the Mu family was, so it was best that Murongjio did not kill him. Thank you, sir. Murongjio was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He thanked Yi Futian and wanted to leave as if he had been pardoned. Shui looked at Murongjio and her lips twitched slightly. There was a hint of displeasure on her face as she mumbled, This guy almost hurt little sister Xiaoya, and he left without even apologizing to her. He really got off easy. Nie Tian came to Cher's side and could not help but laugh when he heard what the latter said. It turned out that Cher's idea was simple. She just wanted Murongjio to apologize. But Murongjio actually slapped himself repeatedly and almost destroyed his own Yuan meridians. It was really speechless. At this time, Shi Lulan and Wei Kong arrived. They looked at Cher with shock on their faces. When Cher was in the scarlet blood abyss, she absorbed the power of the restriction wall. That's why her strength increased. Nie Tian knew what the two were thinking and explained with a smile. Oh. Wei Kong and Shi Lulan nodded, their expressions slowly returning to normal. They could naturally tell that Nie Tian's words were perfunctory. But since Nye Tian was unwilling to say, it was not their place to ask. Let's go. Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, since this place is guarded by the Mu family, let's try from another place. Okay. Wei Kong recovered a little and nodded. Then, the group prepared to leave and enter the Arctic snow mountain from another place. A moment later, they arrived at another part of the void and prepared to enter the Arctic snow mountain. Nye Tian. But at this time, a low murderous voice sounded. It reverberated in the void and was harsh to the ears. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed and his expression changed when he heard this voice. He turned around abruptly and looked up into the void. As far as his eyes could see, a murderous figure stood there. Xiao Tang. When he saw the face clearly, Nye Tian frowned and called out the latter's name. The person standing in front of him was none other than Crown Prince Xian Tian, Xiao Tang. Chapter 29:37. High up in the sky, the Xiantian Crown Prince glared at Nye Tian with a murderous glare, not concealing his murderous intent at all. His eyes were sharp and vicious, as if he wanted nothing more than to hack Nye Tian into 1,000 pieces. Nye Tian's gaze hardened slightly, but then he laughed and said indifferently, I didn't think that we would meet again, Your Highness Xiantian Crown Prince. A super dynasty like the Xiantian dynasty naturally would not sit idly by when a holy world seed had appeared on the Arctic snow mountain. Thus, it was not strange at all that Xiao Tang would appear here. Nye Tian. Seeing that Nye Tian could still laugh, Xiao Tang's anger flared even more. He growled, You and I will not live under the same sky as each other for stealing my wife. Since ancient times, killing one's father and stealing one's wife were the ultimate hatred. Xiao Tang felt that it was Nye Tian who had stolen Jing Yuwei from his hands. If it were not for Nye Tian, Jing Yuwei would already be his woman. He did not like Jing Yuwei, but in his eyes, Jing Yuwei should have belonged to him. What belonged to him, Xiao Tang, could not be taken away by others. Stealing my wife? Upon hearing Xiao Tang's words, Nye Tian couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. He raised his eyebrows and said, Xiao Tang, Jing Yuwei has never been your wife. How can you say that you stole my wife? Bullshit. Xiao Tang was instantly enraged by Nye Tian and roared, If it weren't for you, Jing Yuwei would already be mine. Is that so? Nye Tianling responded with a smile, but then his expression darkened. Xiao Tang, you are too despicable. A person like you is not worthy of the eldest princess. You're courting death. Xiao Tang's eyes trembled and flashed coldly. Finally, he could not hold it in any longer. With a low growl, he struck out with his palm. A powerful palm force pressed down on the void and rolled out towards Nye Tian. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he prepared to act. However, with his current strength, it was basically impossible for him to confront Xiao Tang head-on. As the Crown Prince of Xiantian, Xiao Tang possessed the strength of a Stage 8 demi-saint, whereas Nye Tian was merely a Stage 3 demi-saint. The gap in strength between the two was simply too great. Such a gap wasn't something that could be made up for with talent. Swoosh. However, at that instant, a crimson sword glow suddenly appeared. It was extremely sharp as it pierced through the sky. Bang! Wherever the sword light passed, the majestic palm power would immediately crumble. The seemingly inconspicuous sword gleam had the power to destroy everything in its path. The sudden scene caused Xiao Tang's expression to change. His eyes could not help but reveal a look of fear. Pooh! In the next instant, under the circumstances that he didn't even have the time to react, the crimson-red sword light had suddenly flashed by, and it left behind a dazzling injury on his face that was deep to the bone. How is this possible? Xiao Tang's figure retreated several hundred meters before he managed to stabilize himself. He looked at Cher with incomparable shock and screamed in a sharp voice. Before this, he didn't even notice Cher's existence. Even though Shui Er's beauty was stunning, he didn't care. He only noticed Wei Kong. He never thought that the one who saved Nie Tian would be Cher. You shouldn't have attacked Nie Tian, especially in front of me. Cher stood in midair without any aura fluctuation as she spoke calmly. Her voice was very calm and even sounded gentle, but there was a deep sense of intimidation and threat in it. You! Xiao Tang's eyes narrowed involuntarily. In front of Schwerer, he felt his heart tremble. Let's go, Nie Tian. Cher, however, was unwilling to pay attention to Xiao Tang. Her figure flashed, and she appeared beside Nie Tian and said with a smile. Nie Tian nodded and was about to leave. He could tell that the entire Arctic snow mountain had been surrounded by all the major forces, and ordinary people didn't even have the right to enter. It seemed that in order to enter the Arctic snow mountain, he would first have to find the Saint Soul Academy. Nie Tian believed that since all the major forces were here, the Saint Soul Academy would definitely be here as well. Perhaps the dean of the Saint Soul Academy, Kuyo Oniguchi, had already come in person. Xiao Tang naturally didn't dare to stop Nie Tian and the others from leaving. He could only watch helplessly. Imperial brother, you've completely disgraced our Xiantian dynasty. However, at this moment, a cold and playful voice resounded, and it was filled with intense ridicule. Nie Tian frowned and looked in the direction of the voice, only to see a figure in black standing high in the sky. His eyes were extremely gloomy. This person's appearance was somewhat similar to Xiao Tang's, but he gave off an even colder feeling. He looked younger than Xiao Tang, but his strength was higher than Xiao Tang's. He was already a stage 9 demi-saint. Xiao Qin. At that moment, Xiao Tang looked at the black-clothed martial artist and called out his name with a dark expression. The black-clothed martial artist was none other than his brother, the 9th prince of the Xiantian dynasty, Xiao Qin. Brother, you don't seem very happy to see me. Xiao Qin's eyes flashed with a dark light as he stared at Xiao Tang strangely, obviously mocking the sword scar on the latter's face. Xiao Qin, I'm the crown prince of the Xiantian dynasty. Don't go too far, Xiao Tang said with a dark expression. In the Xiantian dynasty, although Xiao Tang was the crown prince, he might not be able to inherit the throne smoothly. After all, the Xiao family still had someone who was far more talented than him, and that was the 9th prince, Xiao Qin. Therefore, the grudge between Xiao Tang and Xiao Qin ran deep. Brother, you've been slapped in the face. As your younger brother, I'm trying to stand up for you. How am I going too far? Xiao Qin's lips curled into a cold smile, but the mockery in his eyes intensified. You're trying to stand up for me? Xiao Tang looked at Xiao Qin and sneered. Do you think this crown prince is inferior to you? Xiao Tang was no fool. How could he not see that Xiao Qin was not trying to stand up for him, but was clearly humiliating him? Humph! Xiao Qin smiled coldly and said with a cold expression, You're inferior to me. Isn't this something everyone in the Xiantian dynasty knows? Xiao Qin, you. Xiao Tang's eyes froze. His expression was extremely ugly, but he could not say anything. He didn't expect Xiao Qin to be so arrogant, directly exposing his hypocrisy and humiliating him. His strength and talent were indeed inferior to Xiao Qin's, but he was still the crown prince of the Xiantian dynasty. QL11 for Xiao Qin to humiliate him in front of outsiders like this. He was clearly in a hurry to take the throne. Brother, don't be angry. Xiao Qin smiled faintly and said, You're inferior to me. As your younger brother, it's only right for me to stand up for you. Bastard, do you think this crown prince needs you to stand up for me? Xiao Tang roared. He was obviously furious. If he did not have a shred of rationality left in him, he would have attacked Xiao Qin long ago. You don't want me to stand up for you, but I insist on standing up for you. Xiao Qin smiled coldly. Then, he turned his cold eyes and stared at Nie Tian. His killing intent was revealed. Chapter 29:38. Even more trash. Xiao Qin glared at Nie Tian, his eyes cold and murderous. So what if it's me? Nie Tian replied calmly. Since the people of the Xiantian dynasty thought that he was the one who took Jing Yue away, he might as well admit it. It's you deserve to die. Shao Qin's gaze turned cold as killing intent gushed forth from his eyes. After that, his silhouette flickered as his aura gushed forth frenziedly, blasting against the space around him. It was extremely violent. Imperial brother, watch carefully. I'm going to kill the person who stole your woman. Shao Qin shouted in midair. Furthermore, I'm going to forcefully take his woman. That little girl is not bad. She suits my taste. Nie Tian's eyes darkened when he heard Shao Qin's words, and his expression changed. This Shao Qin actually dared to profane Shui. Boom. In the next moment, Nie Tian released his sword aura, and his sword intent soared into the sky. Even though he knew he wasn't Shao Qin's match, he wouldn't retreat even half a step. Let me. But right at this moment, Shui-er's voice rang out. After that, her silhouette moved. Her white robes were whiter than snow as she flashed through the air. Little girl, don't think that you can defeat me just because you defeated my good-for-nothing brother. Shao Qin looked at Cher and smiled cold. He said loudly, I'm not someone that good-for-nothing crown prince can compare to. He said that Shao Tang had used 2 good-for-nothings. Shao Tang heard it clearly from the side, and his expression was uglier than if he had eaten **T. He was Shao Qin's brother and the crown prince of the Xiantian dynasty, but he was being humiliated like this. How could he not be angry? He's good for nothing and so are you. Shui-er stood in midair, and the corners of her lips curled up into a smile. A rare hint of anger appeared on her gentle face, and her beautiful eyes sank slightly. A strand of sword intent appeared in her palm, and then she raised her arm, causing sword intent to shoot out from the tip of her finger. Swoosh! The sword intent was extremely sharp, and it pierced through the air like a meteor, drawing a bright red line in the air. However, there was a sharp aura hidden within this resplendence. Shao Qin's eyes narrowed when he felt the sharp qi rushing towards him. He immediately circulated all the energy in his body, and a golden shield appeared around him. Pooh! Immediately after, the crimson sword light struck and pierced through the golden shield around Shao Qin's body. It was so easy, it was as if it wasn't a golden shield, but a layer of paper. Pooh! In the next instant, the scarlet sword light split into 2 and flew past Shao Qin's face, leaving a sword mark on both sides of his face. Everything happened in an instant. Shao Qin's body froze on the spot, unable to react for a long time. When Nie Tian saw this, his eyes narrowed and he was shocked. Cher's control over sword intent had simply reached the pinnacle of perfection. It was just a small sword light, yet it had easily broken through Shao Qin's defense and left 2 sword scars on his face. Her precise control over sword intent was indeed amazing. What was even more terrifying was that even Nie Tian couldn't tell how powerful Shui-er's battle prowess was. Cher had attacked several times, but she had only injured her opponent and not killed him. Although this method was merciful, it was more difficult than killing someone directly. Furthermore, Snow had yet to draw her sword, and she was only using her sword intent in an extremely restrained manner. It was hard to predict how terrifying Cher's combat power would be if she used the god-slaying sword and fully released her sword intent. Shao Qin's cultivation was the same as Cher's, and he was obviously not a mediocre person. However, he could not fight back against Cher at all. If Cher wanted to kill him, even if he had 1,000 lives, he would have died a long time ago. You're even more useless than your brother, Cher said coldly as she retracted her sword intent and glanced at Shao Qin with a proud and aloof gaze. Shao Qin's words had angered her. Otherwise, she would not have been so angry. Ha 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 ha! On the other side, there was a sudden burst of laughter. Shao Tang's face was wild with joy as he said loudly, Shao Qin, is this how you stand up for your brother? Although Xiao Tang wanted to kill Nie Tian, he did not want Nie Tian to die in the hands of others, especially not Xiao Qin. Therefore, he was very happy that Xiao Qin had been humiliated. "Shut up!" Xiao Qin stood there. Xiao Tang's voice was like a steel needle piercing into his heart, making him feel his blood boil. He suddenly looked at Xiao Tang and roared. Xiao Tang looked at Xiao Qin and actually felt the murderous intent from the latter. His face stiffened and he did not dare to make a sound. He felt that if he continued to laugh, Xiao Qin might really kill him. "You brat, you forced me to do this." The next moment, Xiao Qin's expression changed. His eyes were extremely vicious, and one of his eyes suddenly turned a strange scarlet color. "Huh!" Nie Tian saw this and his eyes suddenly froze. He exclaimed in surprise, "Other pupils!" He did not expect Xiao Qin to be a martial artist with other pupils. Xiao Qin's mother was Empress Xiantian, who possessed the illusion blood eyes of the night. Therefore, it was not strange that Xiao Qin had other pupils. However, Nie Tian felt that Xiao Qin's other pupil's aura was very strange. It should not be the illusion blood eyes of the night. One of Xiao Qin's eye sockets suddenly widened, and the space around him turned scarlet. It was as if he had used his eye power to open a boundary. Cher looked at Xiao Qin. Her pretty face did not change, as if she did not care at all. "Go to hell." In the next moment, Xiao Qin let out a ferocious roar, and his figure instantly moved. He was like a bloody ray of light, directly attacking Cher. Cher stood where she was, and the sword intent in her body surged out. It was as red as blood, and it seemed to solidify around her body. "Stop! Stop now!" However, at this moment, two voices rang out in the air at almost the same time. Xiao Qin's expression changed slightly in midair, but his eyes instantly returned to normal. His figure paused and he stopped. Seeing this, Cher dispersed the sword intent around her. The two of them stopped in time, avoiding a head-on clash. In the next moment, two figures landed behind Xiao Qin and Nie Tian. "Queen Mother!" Xiao Qin turned to look at the person behind him and bowed deeply in reverence. The person standing behind him was none other than the Empress of the Xiantian dynasty, his mother, Xiao Lin. On the other side, Nie Tian turned and smiled at the person in front of him. He said, "Elder Hua." Hua Yiru was standing behind him. The two voices just now had come from Xiao Lin and Hua Yiru. "Empress Mother, Xiao Qin," he. Right at this moment, Xiao Tang arrived beside Xiao Lin and complained in a threatening manner. However, he had just opened his mouth when Xiao Lin glared at him, causing him to swallow the rest of his words and retreat to the side in fright. Then, Xiao Lin's beautiful eyes flashed. She looked at Hua Yiru and said, "Mr. Hua, long time no see." "Long time no see, Your Majesty." Hua Yiru smiled faintly, his eyes shining with a strange light. Seeing this, Nie Tian couldn't help but be taken aback. Chapter 29-39. A friendly reminder. Nie Tian looked at Hua Yiru and Xiao Lin, unable to hide his surprise. He hadn't expected the two to know each other. "Mr. Hua, I heard that you're a teacher at Saint Soul Academy. Is that true?" Xiao Lin asked with a faint smile. "It's true." Hua Yiru nodded and laughed. "I'm an adult and just want to find a place to settle down." Xiao Lin had a strange look in her eyes. In this Empress' eyes, Mr. Hua isn't someone who craves stability. The ancestor once invited Mr. Hua to be the state preceptor of the Xiantian dynasty, but Mr. Hua mercilessly refused. "Why do you want to stay at Saint Soul Academy and be a mere teacher now?" Nie Tian's eyes narrowed at Xiao Lin's words. It turned out that Hua Yiru and the ancestor of the Xiantian dynasty had met before, and they were on good terms. Otherwise, the ancestor wouldn't have made Hua Yiru the state preceptor of the Xiantian dynasty. Unfortunately, Hua Yiru had refused the ancestor. No wonder Hua Yiru knew about the meteorite stone in the Xiantian mystery land. Times have changed. Hua Yiru smiled faintly. "Well said. Xiao Lin's eyes trembled. The number one God Pill Master of the Holy Soul region is actually willing to be a teacher at Saint Soul Academy. Times have changed. What number one God Pill Master? Her Majesty thinks too highly of me. Huairu laughed and waved his hand. Nie Tian frowned, and the way he looked at Huairu changed. He knew that Huairu was a God Pill Master, but he didn't expect him to be the number one God Pill Master of the Holy Soul region. However, Huairu didn't seem to agree with the title of number one God Pill Master. Mr. Hua, do you also know Nie Tian? At this time, Xiao Lin turned her gaze to Nie Tian and asked in a deep voice. Nie Tian is a student of Saint Soul Academy. Of course I know him. Huairu smiled. Mr. Hua, not long ago, Nie Tian entered the mysterious sky mystery realm and took away the meteorite stone. Is this related to you? Xiao Lin's beautiful eyes narrowed. She smiled and asked directly. Huairu exclaimed in surprise. When did this happen? Why doesn't I know about it? As he spoke, he looked at Nie Tian with an angry expression and scolded. Nie Tian, did you really take the heavenly meteorite stone? Nie Tian was amused in his heart. This old monster's acting skills were quite good. Since Huairu was acting, Nie Tian naturally had to cooperate. He felt wronged and said, Elder Hua, I took the heavenly meteorite stone with the permission of the mysterious heaven ancestor. Her Majesty was there at the time and saw it with her own eyes. Nie Tian, you. Xiao Lin's pretty face stiffened. She was so angry that she couldn't speak. When Nie Tian said that she saw it with her own eyes, he was clearly saying that she was trash. She actually watched someone else take away the heavenly meteorite stone. Eyebrows furrowed, Nie Tian asked, Your Majesty, don't tell me that you've forgotten what Patriarch Profound Heaven said to you. You're not forgetting things, Your Majesty. Nie Tian, this Empress knows very well what the ancestor said. There's no need for you to remind me. Xiao Lin's eyes turned cold as she said in a deep voice. It's good that you remember. I was just reminding you out of goodwill. I was afraid that Your Majesty would accidentally forget. Nie Tian chuckled with a proud expression. Your Majesty, if there's nothing else, we'll take our leave. Then, Huairu smiled faintly and took a step forward. I won't see you out. Xiao Lin knew that she couldn't attack Nie Tian and the others, so she replied in a cold manner. Your Majesty, this brat took away my woman. The girl next to him left a sword mark on my face to humiliate me. Are we just going to let it go? Xiao Tang shouted anxiously when he saw that Nie Tian was about to leave. But as soon as he finished speaking, a crisp slap sounded on his face, directly turning half of his face into a bloody mess. Your Majesty, I... Xiao Tang looked at Xiao Lin in shock. He didn't know what he had done wrong. Idiot! Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough? Xiao Lin shouted in a low voice. Her eyes were cold and cold. Xiao Tang was so scared that his expression froze. He didn't dare to say anything else. Your Majesty is teaching your son a lesson. We won't disturb you anymore. Goodbye. Nie Tian smiled and turned to leave. Xiao Lin looked in the direction where Nie Tian and the others left. Her pretty face was so gloomy that it looked like it was about to drip blood. Your Majesty, are you really going to swallow this? Xiao Qin took a step forward and said cautiously. So what if I can't swallow it? Do you want this Empress to disobey the ancestors' orders? Xiao Lin shouted in a low voice. There was a strange look in her eyes. Xiao Qin raised his head and looked at Xiao Lin. He didn't dare to say anything else. Nie Tian, the girl next to you is very interesting. Xiao Lin's eyes flashed with a dark light. She laughed sinisterly in her mind. If this Empress isn't wrong, she should be from the ancient Ming race. And her relationship with the Emperor of the Netherworld must be unusual. This Empress is very curious. What kind of expression would Dean Saint Soul have if he knew the girl's true identity? The Emperor of the Netherworld of the ancient Ming race is someone on the Holy Soul Sin tablet. It turned out that Xiao Lin had seen through Cher's identity the moment she made her move. Nie Tian and the others left with Huairu. Huairu brought them to a barren land outside of the Arctic snow mountain. Nie Tian, did your trip to the Bitter Sea horizon go smoothly? Huairu landed and looked at Nie Tian. Yes, it went smoothly. Nie Tian nodded and smiled. He had already gotten what he wanted. There was no need to say more about the hardships he had gone through. In that case, you should already know my identity, Huairu said with a smile. I know. Nie Tian nodded. He naturally understood that Huairu was referring to the ancestor of the Cloud Buddha Shi family. However, Nie Tian was curious as to why the ancestor of the Cloud Buddha Shi family was surnamed Hua instead of Shi. Huairu nodded and looked at Wei Kong and Shi Lulan. Finally, his gaze landed on Shi Lulan. He couldn't conceal the concern in his eyes as he asked, Miss, you are from the Cloud Buddha Shi family, right? What's your name? Senior, this junior is Shi Lulan. Shi Lulan bowed respectfully. This junior is Wei Kong. Wei Kong also bowed respectfully. Huairu nodded and didn't say anything else. However, his gaze lingered on Wei Kong for a moment. He didn't expect Wei Kong to be from the Seven Knights Wei family. Huairu turned to look at Cher with a strange expression. Miss, may I know how to address you? I am Cher. Cher nodded in response. Her voice was soft and her eyes were timid, as if she was afraid of Huairu. Cher. Nie Tian took a step forward and held Cher's hand when he saw her reaction. Cher looked at Nie Tian and clenched her fists. Her expression was much calmer. Chapter 2940. An opportunity. Nie Tian could not help but frown when he saw Huairu's strange expression and asked, Elder Hua, are you all right? I'm fine. Huairu was taken aback for a moment before his expression returned to normal and he forced a smile. Elder Hua, do you have something to say? Nie Tian was even more puzzled. It seemed that Huairu had discovered something unusual about Cher. Huairu's eyes narrowed slightly as he glanced at Cher. Upon seeing this, Nie Tian immediately understood what he meant. Turning to Schwerer, he said, Schwerer, you and Little Ye enter the 9 Superbs first. Okay. Cher looked at Huairu timidly and nodded in agreement. Nie Tian immediately let Cher and Xiao Ye enter the 9 Extremities before he looked at Huairu. He was very puzzled at the moment and could not understand why Cher would be so afraid of Huairu. Huairu only had the strength of a first-level demi-saint. Forget Cher, he would even be killed by Nie Tian in a single move. With Cher's current strength, she would not even be afraid of a weaker low-level demi-saint. So why would she be afraid of a first-level demi-saint? Wei Kong, Lulan, I have something to say to Nie Tian. Both of you leave for a moment. Huairu looked at Wei Kong and Shi Lulan and said without hesitation. The two nodded and left, waiting in the distance. Elder Hua, what did you discover? Can you tell me now? Nie Tian asked solemnly as he looked at Huairu. Nie Tian, what is your relationship with this Cher? Huairu did not answer directly and asked instead. She is my wife. Nie Tian did not hide anything and nodded. Although he did not marry Cher, in his heart, the latter was already his woman, his wife. It really is an extraordinary relationship. Huairu's face darkened and his expression became very solemn. Elder Hua, what's going on? Just tell me. Nie Tian looked at Huairu anxiously. Nie Tian, tell me the truth. What is Cher's true identity? Huairu's expression was solemn and he wasn't anxious at all. Cher was born from the Emperor of the Underworld's heaven-punishing demonic heart. She is the good body among the 3 bodies of demonic heart. Nie Tian knew that it was useless to be anxious, so he said, although Cher was born from the devil's heart, she is pure and kind. She is definitely not a bad person. Devil Heart 3 Transformations. The expression in Huairu's eyes darkened as he said, Nie Tian, you already know that the name of the Underworld Emperor has been engraved on the Holy Soul Monument. If Dean Saint Soul finds out that you have a heaven-punishing benevolent physique by your side, do you think he will let it live? Nie Tian frowned and his face stiffened. Was this what Hua Iru was worried about? However, this was indeed something Nie Tian hadn't considered. If Kuyo Oneguchi really found out about Cher's true identity, the latter would indeed be in great danger. After a moment of pondering, Nie Tian said with a faint smile, "Rest assured, Elder Hua. I can make sure that Shui stays in the 9 supernaturals. The Ghostvale sect and Curse World won't be able to find out about her. Cher must never appear again, let alone attack." Hua Iru nodded heavily and said in a deep voice. The reason why he could see through Cher's identity was because Cher had released her sword intent when she had fought with Shao Qin. Otherwise, even he wouldn't have been able to detect anything out of the ordinary. After Cher had merged with the heavenly Sacred Heart, her aura had been completely concealed. If she didn't actively release her aura, no one except a sage would be able to sense her aura. But now, Empress Xiantian will be a problem. Hua Iru frowned and said worriedly, "Elder Hua, are you saying that Empress Xiantian has also seen through Cher's identity?" Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he asked. "Yes." Hua Iru smiled bitterly and said, "That woman has the blood eyes of the night illusion. The moment Cher attacked, she already knew Cher's identity." "Will she tell Dean Saint Soul about this?" Nie Tian's face darkened slightly as he asked. "Probably not now, but I don't know if she will in the future." Hua Iru shook his head and said, "Based on my understanding of Empress Xiantian, she will definitely use this to threaten you." This. Nie Tian's face stiffened and he felt very guilty. He was very annoyed that he was too weak. Otherwise, he wouldn't have needed Cher's help. Now that Cher's identity had been exposed, it was equivalent to Empress Xiantian having a handle on him. Given Empress Xuantian's greed, she would definitely demand an exorbitant price from Nie Tian at the right time. "Nie Tian, you don't have to worry too much about this. I'm guessing that Empress Xiantian won't tell Dean Saint Soul about this unless it's absolutely necessary. Doing so won't benefit her in any way. She won't do something meaningless," Hua Iru said to Nie Tian in a low voice. "Yes." Nie Tian nodded. Since things had already come to this, there was no point in worrying about it. However, he had a feeling that Hua Iru's worries were not limited to this. He guessed that Hua Iru must have discovered something on Cher's body, but just didn't want to tell him. Nie Tian, a second sacred world seed, has appeared in the sacred soul realm. This is an opportunity for you. Hua Iru's face darkened slightly as he looked at Nie Tian. Opportunity? What opportunity? Nie Tian was stunned for a moment. He didn't know what Hua Iru meant. Of course, the sacred world seed was a good thing. It had already alarmed the entire sacred soul realm. Even the forces of other domains would make a move upon hearing about it. Hua Iru said that the sacred world seed was an opportunity for Nie Tian, which made him very confused. Could it be that Hua Iru wanted Nie Tian to obtain the sacred world seed? However, given Nie Tian's current strength, he probably wasn't even qualified to see the sacred world seed. An opportunity to improve your strength again. Hua Iru looked at Nie Tian with a strange glint in his eyes. "Oh." Nie Tian looked at Hua Iru and couldn't help but laugh. "Elder Hua, you want me to take advantage of this opportunity to obtain some sacred qi liquid from the sacred world seed, right? Sacred qi liquid is indeed a good thing. If I can obtain some, it will indeed improve my strength greatly." Sacred qi liquid? Hua Iru couldn't help but laugh when he heard Nie Tian's words. "Future Star Sky Sacred Leader, your vision is too narrow." Nie Tian was stunned again. His expression changed as he asked in shock, "Elder Hua, you're not really going to let me obtain the sacred world seed, are you? What's wrong with that?" Hua Iru smiled faintly as a divine light flashed in his eyes. Nie Tian was speechless and froze on the spot. Hua Iru said it so casually as if no one cared about the sacred world seed and that it could be taken at will. At this time, All the major forces of the sacred soul realm had gathered at the Arctic snow mountain. No matter what, it was impossible for a half-saint like Nye Tian to monopolize the sacred world seed. If it wasn't for the fact that Nye Tian knew Hua-Eru very well, he would definitely think that the person standing in front of him was a lunatic. Chapter 2941. Going all out, what? Nye Tian's eyes narrowed when he heard Hua-Eru's words, and his face froze. Hua-Eru had expected such a reaction from Nye Tian. He smiled faintly and repeated, I said, the sacred world seed is what you need to unseal the second star scar dark seal. Well, Nye Tian's face trembled slightly, and he froze again. He had heard clearly that the sacred world seed was what he needed to unseal the second star scar dark seal. Nye Tian already knew that every strand of star power was imprisoned by the 9 star scar dark seals. It was precisely because of the layers of imprisonment of the 9 star scar dark seals that the star power could not unleash its true power. Not long ago, Nye Tian had fused with the heavenly meteorite and unsealed the first star scar dark seal. The reason why his combat power was so terrifying was inextricably linked to the unsealing of the first star scar dark seal. If Nye Tian had not unsealed the first star scar dark seal, he would have been able to fight a stage 9 demi-saint at best. But the unsealing of the first star scar dark seal allowed him to fight a stage 5 demi-saint with the strength of a stage 3 demi-saint. After the unsealing of the star scar dark seal, the star power had improved his strength so much that it had exceeded his expectations. However, Hua-Eru had said that the unsealing of the 9 star scar dark seals was different, and different things were needed. The first star scar dark seal needed the heavenly meteorite, while the second star scar dark seal needed the sacred world seed. It turned out that the opportunity that Hua-Eru had mentioned was really for Nye Tian to take the sacred world seed for himself. But that was the sacred world seed. Countless eyes were watching it, and there was no telling how many people were willing to sacrifice their lives for the sacred world seed. Nye Tian was just a stage 3 demi-saint. How could he take the sacred world seed for himself? Nye Tian, we must not miss this opportunity. Hua-Eru looked at Nye Tian with blazing eyes. Compared to Nye Tian himself, he was more eager for Nye Tian to unseal the star-marked dark seal as soon as possible. Elder Hua, Nye Tian finally reacted and looked a little embarrassed. The reason for that was because their strength was truly too weak. Nye Tian, the chances of a realm system giving birth to a sacred world seed are very small. In the entire myriad realms, there are only 3 realms that have nurtured a sacred world seed. Hua-Eru said gravely, the other saints' world seeds are all controlled by powerful organizations of the myriad regions. The sacred world seed in front of us has just appeared. This is our best chance. Elder Hua, I understand what you're saying, but what right do we have to fight for a saint's world seed? Nye Tian smiled bitterly as he looked at Hua-Eru's fervent gaze. As long as you want it, we will definitely have a chance. Hua-Eru looked at him and suddenly smiled. What I want to see now is your determination. All right. Nye Tian's eyes darkened and became firm in an instant. He said heavily, Elder Hua, I'm willing to do my best. What he desired the most right now was to increase his strength. He did not want what had happened today to happen again. He was a man. How could he let Cher protect him all the time? He believed that as long as he could unlock the second star scar dark seal, his strength would usher in a qualitative improvement. Very well. Hua-Eru sensed the determination in Nye Tian's eyes. He smiled faintly and said, What I want is your determination. Nye Tian nodded slightly, but his expression was somewhat ugly. They were fighting for a sacred world seed, so they needed to compete with strength. Determination alone was far from enough. Nye Tian, I've already made some arrangements in advance. After a while, Hua-Eru calmed down a lot. He smiled faintly and said, I've informed someone. He's the most important person. I hope he can arrive in time. Nye Tian nodded. Since Huairu had said so, he was somewhat prepared. Judging from Huairu's previous arrangements for the meteorite stone, he was definitely extremely good at planning. He hoped that this time, Huairu would not let Nie Tian down. But now, your strength urgently needs to increase. Huairu then looked at Nie Tian with a deep frown. He admitted that Nie Tian's strength had increased at a speed far beyond his expectations after entering the Sacred Soul region. But now that the Sacred World Seed had appeared, Nie Tian was only a rank 3 half-sage. This was simply not enough. If Huairu's plan succeeded and Nie Tian obtained the opportunity to merge with the Sacred World Seed, then Nie Tian would need to at least have the strength of a rank 9 half-sage. Otherwise, he would not be able to withstand the impact of the Sacred World Seed's power. Elder Hua, how much time do I have? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he asked in a deep voice. They could not enter the Arctic snow mountain now, so he still had some time. Currently, the various forces of the Sacred Soul region have already discussed. In half a month, all the major forces will unite and form a team to enter the Arctic snow mountain. Huairu nodded slightly and said, all the forces wanted to obtain the Sacred World Seed, but it was not that easy to obtain. Before the various forces started fighting each other, the first thing they had to do was to unite and break the protective array of the Sacred World Seed. If they could not even break the protective array of the Sacred World Seed, how could they even talk about obtaining the seed? The Sacred Soul region itself had many forces, and with the addition of forces from other domains, it was very difficult for all parties to complete the discussion. It was already very good that the joint team could set off in half a month. That means I still have half a month's time. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he said in a deep voice. Yes. Huaming nodded and said, Nie Tian, you must advance to rank 9 half-sage within half a month. Rank 9 half-sage. Nie Tian was stunned when he heard Huairu's words. He was currently only a rank 3 half-sage. Was it possible for him to advance 6 levels in half a month? This is the minimum. Huairu nodded heavily with a solemn expression. The 9th rank of the half-saint realm was already his lowest expectation. If Nie Tian could not reach rank 9 half-sage within half a month, it would be impossible for him to fuse with the Sacred World Seed. Nie Tian, I have 3 drops of sacred qi liquid here. Take them. Huairu handed over the 3 drops of sacred qi liquid while Nie Tian was still in a daze. Nie Tian's eyes instantly lit up as he took the 3 drops of sacred qi liquid. But in the next moment, his expression turned ugly again. Even 3 drops of sacred qi liquid would only allow him to break through to rank 5 half-sage at most. How could he improve his strength to rank 4 half-sage? Nie Tian, have you forgotten about the blood yuan of the Saint Soul? Just as his face turned ugly, Liolio's voice suddenly rang out. Sacred Spirit Blood Source. Nie Tian's eyes trembled when he heard Liolio's words, and his lips involuntarily curled up. He had actually forgotten about the Sacred Spirit Blood Source. The Sacred Spirit Blood Source was left behind after he killed the guardian called Guegu Enian in the Sacred Soul Valley's Myriad Bones Cave. He still remembered the surprised look on Liolio's face when he saw the Sacred Spirit Blood Source. After that, the Sacred Spirit Blood Source was handed over to Lulu to refine. Looking at the time, it was almost complete. Chapter 2942. The martial body is too strong. Liolio's sudden mention of the Saint Spirit Blood Yuan boosted Nie Tian's confidence. The Saint Spirit Blood Yuan came from the mysterious Guegu Enian of the Myriad Bones Blood Cave. The power it contained was immeasurable. If there were no accidents, it should be able to help Nie Tian reach the 9th stage. Huairu couldn't help but frown and ask, Nie Tian, are you confident that you can break through to the 9th grade within 2 weeks? No problem. Nie Tian nodded with a smile. To be honest, he did not have absolute confidence, but the current situation did not allow him to take a step back. He had to give it his all. All right. Huairu nodded with a smile, feeling Nie Tian's confidence. Elder Hua, there is one more thing that you need someone to do for me. At this moment, Nie Tian suddenly thought of another urgent matter. Hua Iru nodded. I have obtained the Manjusaka. I need to send it back to the Nine Regions Alliance as soon as possible. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. The Manjusaka is a sacred immemorial flower. It is extremely useful. You should arrange for a divine alchemist to send it. Leave it to me. Huairu nodded with a smile. He naturally knew what Nie Tian was thinking. The latter was worried that the injured in the Nine Regions were aging too quickly. Sending a divine alchemist to send the Manjusaka could not only teach Nie Dao and the rest how to absorb the Manjusaka's energy, but also examine their injuries. Huairu was a divine alchemist himself. Sending a divine alchemist to the Nine Regions was a piece of cake for him. Elder Hua, thank you. Nie Tian handed the Manjusaka to Huairu. Huairu did not waste any time. He immediately brought Nie Tian to a temporary city outside the Arctic Snow Mountain. This temporary city belonged to the Saint Soul Academy. The entire snowy mountains of the extreme sea had already been surrounded by temporary cities of various sizes. They were like a pack of wolves eyeing the sacred world seed. Nie Tian, you guys stay here for the time being. If there's anything, I'm not far from you. If there's anything, you can come to me at any time. Huairu took Nie Tian to a small courtyard and nodded. Nie Tian agreed and entered the small courtyard with Wei Kong and the others. Since Wei Kong and Shi Lulan had nowhere to go, they decided to stay with Nie Tian. Nie Tian found a room and entered it. Nie Tian, this subordinate of yours is really gutsy. As soon as they entered the room, Little Fat Cat's voice rang out, saying in a deep voice, "You're indeed courageous to take the seed of the sacred realm for yourself." The Ghost Emperor said, "That's right." Nie Tian smiled bitterly. His expression was a little strange. He had to admit that Huairu was really courageous. If he had not mentioned it, Nie Tian would not have dared to have any extravagant hopes for the seed of the sacred realm. One should know that the seed of the sacred realm could completely change a territory, and could even create a sacred realm. The entire Saint Soul region and other top forces of the myriad domains were all watching to obtain the seed of the sacred realm. If Huairu's plan succeeded, and Nie Tian successfully merged with the seed of the sacred realm, how would these forces treat Nie Tian? There's no point in thinking too much. Increasing my strength is the most important thing now. Nie Tian smiled. 3 drops of sacred qi liquid appeared in his palm. This was specially prepared by Huairu for him to increase his strength. Nie Tian did not hesitate. He raised his head and swallowed the liquid. He then sat down cross-legged and entered a state of cultivation. The 3 drops of sacred qi liquid contained extremely powerful energy. The moment he swallowed the sacred qi liquid, Nie Tian felt a powerful force appear and impact his martial physique. However, this force did not cause any pressure on his martial physique. Instead, it made him feel very comfortable. Half a day later, Nie Tian completely absorbed the power of the 3 drops of sacred qi liquid and walked out of the room. At this moment, his aura was much stronger than before. However, his expression wasn't very good. It seems that the power of the sacred qi liquid is also very limited, Nie Tian murmured with a deep frown. After absorbing the 3 drops of sacred qi liquid, his strength was currently at the 5th stage half-saint. This increase in strength was within Nie Tian's expectations. Before he had taken the sacred qi liquid, he was at the 3rd stage half-saint. However, there were already signs of him breaking through to the 4th stage half-saint. Even if he did not take the sacred qi liquid, he would still be able to break through very quickly under normal circumstances. The power of the 3 drops of sacred qi liquid was equivalent to increasing Nie Tian's strength by a little more than 1 level. Although this increase was not bad, it was not enough to satisfy Nie Tian. Originally, He had hoped that even if the 3 drops of sacred chi liquid could not help him break through to the 6th stage half-saint, it would at least allow him to reach the peak of the 5th stage half-saint. However, the reality was that he had only reached the 5th stage half-saint. He could not even see the shadow of a 6th stage half-saint. The power of the 3 drops of sacred chi liquid should not be limited to this, Nie Tian said gloomily. Nie Tian, the power of the 3 drops of sacred chi liquid is indeed very strong. If it was an ordinary 3rd stage half-saint, the 3 drops of sacred chi liquid would be enough to upgrade to the 6th stage or even the 7th stage half-saint. At this moment, Fat Cat said, "But your martial physique is very special. It is too powerful. Because of this, you need to absorb more power than other martial physiques of the same level to increase your strength." I see. Nie Tian could not help but smile bitterly after hearing Fat Cat's explanation. It seemed that there were pros and cons to having a powerful martial physique. Nie Tian, it seems that this emperor has underestimated your martial physique. At this moment, Liolio's voice rang out, "The strength of your martial physique has exceeded this emperor's expectations. So even if this emperor allows you to absorb the power of the sacred spirit blood yuan, you might not be able to reach the 9th stage half-saint realm." This. Liolio's words stunned Nie Tian and his face froze. His martial physique was indeed too powerful, far surpassing other martial physique of the same level. The supreme dragon vein, 900 billion stars, the fiend god origin embryo, the supreme demonic flame, and other heaven-defying items had brought him great power, but at the same time, he needed more power to increase his strength. This is going to be a little troublesome. After a long time, Nie Tian frowned with a worried expression. He only had a dozen or so days, and if he was unable to increase his strength to the 9th stage half-saint realm within these dozen or so days, it would be terrible. Lulu, if I were to absorb the power of the sacred spirit blood yuan now, what realm would my strength increase to? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he asked in a solemn voice. At most, the 8th stage half-saint, replied Lulu. 8th stage. Nie Tian muttered with an unsightly expression. He had to break through to the 9th stage half-saint in one go because he still needed some time to stabilize his cultivation after his strength skyrocketed. Lulu, is there any other way? Nie Tian asked with a frown. Lulu pondered for a long time before he finally said, "There might be a way, but you won't be able to find it in a short time." "What is it?" Nie Tian's eyes burned with excitement. Chapter 2943. An item of both ice and fire? When Nie Tian heard Liolio's words, he could not help but ask, "What do you want such a thing for?" "To completely activate the power of the sacred spirit blood yuan." Lulu responded in a deep voice. "What do you mean?" Nie Tian was stunned for a moment, not quite understanding what Lulu meant. "Although I have refined the power of the sacred spirit blood yuan, I have not completely refined it." Lulu explained, "It's like when you absorb the power of the sacred chi liquid. Although you feel that your martial body has completely absorbed the sacred chi liquid, most of the power of the sacred chi liquid is lost in the process of absorption. The absorption of various powers is something that warriors often encounter. But no matter what power, it is impossible to completely absorb it without any loss. Let me give you the simplest example. When a warrior obtains a martial arts inheritance, most of the power of the inheritance is lost in the process of absorption. What the warrior absorbs is only a very small part of the power in the martial arts inheritance. This is why many warriors do not have much improvement in strength after integrating with the power of the inheritance. It is not because the power of the inheritance is too weak, but because the power of the inheritance is lost. After listening to Lulu, Nie Tian could not help but frown. He understood what Lulu meant. The power of the sacred spirit blood yuan was very strong, but he could absorb a small part of it and eventually transform it into his own power. In this way, most of the power would be lost. TQR 1 inch. The two extremes of ice and fire are the two extreme states of the existence of energy. In this state, the loss of energy is the least. At this time, Lulu continued, if you can find an item of both ice and fire, and then absorb the power of the sacred spirit blood yuan, you can minimize the loss of energy. In this way, you can advance to the stage 9 semi-sage realm. I understand. Nie Tian nodded, but his expression became very ugly. He only had a dozen or so days to find an item of both ice and fire extremities. Situ Bai's ice and fire lake was a kind of extreme ice and fire state, but St. Sol Academy was too far from the Arctic snow mountain. A round trip would take more than 10 days, or even dozens of days. Furthermore, Nie Tian wasn't sure how useful the ice fire lake would be. Nie Tian, why don't you go ask old man Hua? That guy is a god alchemist, I'm sure he knows a lot of things related to ice and fire. At this point, the fat cat's voice rang out, reminding Nie Tian. Okay. Nie Tian nodded slightly and went to find Huairu. A moment later, he arrived at Huairu's residence. A fifth-rank half-saint? When Huairu saw Nie Tian, his first reaction was to sense the latter's strength. However, when he sensed Nie Tian's strength, his face stiffened and turned ugly. He knew that Nie Tian had already taken 3 drops of Saint Qi liquid, but the increase in his strength disappointed him. He originally thought that 3 drops of Saint Qi liquid would be enough for Nie Tian to advance to the 6th-rank half-saint. Looks like your martial physique is too strong. Huairu shook his head and said helplessly. Okay. Nie Tian nodded and explained the situation he was facing. Of course, he omitted the existence of Lulu, but he emphasized that he needed an item of both ice and fire extremities. An item of both ice and fire extremities. After listening to Nie Tian, Huairu frowned slightly and thought for a long time before saying, an item of both ice and fire extremities is very rare. A long time ago, I heard that someone found heavenly ice rheumatism in the Arctic snow mountain. Heavenly ice rheumatism. When Nie Tian heard this name, his eyes couldn't help but narrow. This name sounded very strange and made people immediately think of the state of both ice and fire extremities. Yes. Huairu nodded and said, heavenly ice rheumatism is a kind of natural wonder that contains both ice and fire extremities. It looks like a ball of fire on the outside, but it's actually in a state of ice. I've only heard of this kind of thing, but I've never seen it with my own eyes. If you can find heavenly ice rheumatism, you can solve your current predicament. Nie Tian's eyes became slightly hot as he said, Elder Hua, you said that heavenly ice rheumatism was once discovered in the Arctic snow mountain, right? Yes. The corners of Huairu's mouth twitched. But that was a long time ago. I don't know if there is still heavenly ice rheumatism in the Arctic snow mountain now. Whether there is or not, I have to give it a try. Nie Tian's eyes were fixed as he said in a low voice. Nie Tian, do you want to enter the Arctic snow mountain? Huairu looked at Nie Tian and couldn't help but be surprised. Nie Tian only had less than half a month. It really wasn't suitable for him to enter the Arctic snow mountain at this time. I must enter. Nie Tian nodded heavily. He looked at Huairu and asked, Elder Hua, do you have a way? Huairu looked at Nie Tian, hesitated, and finally nodded. Right now, the Arctic snow mountain had been sealed off by various factions. However, many factions would secretly send some people into the Arctic snow mountain within their own control to first scout out the situation inside the mountain. Huairu explained briefly to Nie Tian and finally said, Nie Tian, you must be careful when you enter the Arctic snow mountain early. If you encounter people from other factions, they will definitely kill you. I know. Nie Tian nodded with a smile and said, Elder Hua, don't worry, I will be careful. No matter what faction they were from, they were not allowed to enter the Arctic snow mountain at this time. Therefore, if people from 2 factions met, it would be a battle to the death. Elder Hua, there is no time to lose. Let me enter the Arctic snow mountain now. Nye Tian nodded slightly and said in a low voice. Okay. Huairu agreed and then led Nye Tian to a remote place in the small city. Moments later, the two arrived at the entrance of the Arctic snow mountain. Two black-clothed martial practitioners stood guard at the entrance. Stop! Huairu and Nye Tian had just approached when a black-clothed martial practitioner stepped forward and shouted, gesturing for the two to stop. Student, I am a teacher at the academy, Huairu. I will send this student into the Arctic snow mountain. Huairu smiled faintly and said calmly. Great Master Hua, I recognize you. The black-clothed martial practitioner smiled darkly and said, but you may not recognize me. Huairu sensed that this person was up to no good. He could not help but frown and asked, Who are you? Let me introduce myself. I am Tian Zhuowei. The black-clothed martial practitioner smiled coldly and stared at Nye Tian with a pair of cold eyes. Tian Zhuowei. Hearing this name, Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He had a bad feeling in his heart. Nye Tian, does my name remind you of someone? Tian Zhuowei smiled cold and said. Who is Tian Zhuowen to you? Nye Tian frowned and asked directly. He was not a fool. Of course, he could guess that this Tian Zhuowei in front of him was obviously a member of the Tian family. And judging from the name, Tian Zhuowei and Tian Zhuowen's relationship was not ordinary. Chapter 2944. Tian Zhuowei revealed his identity and did not hide his killing intent when he looked at Nye Tian. At that moment, he wanted nothing more than to rush up and tear Nye Tian to shreds. So you're Tian Zhuowen's second brother. Nye Tian smiled faintly. He didn't deny it and said, I killed Tian Zhuowen. Tian Zhuowen was the first important person Nye Tian had killed after entering the Saint Soul Academy. He had thought that the matter was over and did not expect it to be brought up again. Brat, you are so insolent. Tian Zhuowei could see the disdain in Nye Tian's eyes and could not help but grimace as he said coldly, I will avenge brother one. What? Are you going to kill me? Nye Tianling laughed and raised his brow in a very provocative manner. Forgive me for being blunt, but your strength is not enough to catch my eye. Tian Zhuowei was not weak and was a rank 4 demi-saint. However, it was a pity that he was no longer strong enough to kill Nye Tian. Is that so? Tian Zhuowei growled, a cold glint surging in his eyes as he said coldly, a mere rank 5 demi-saint, aren't you afraid of being treated as an idiot for saying such words? A rank 5 demi-saint looking down on a rank 4 demi-saint would certainly be treated as an idiot if seen by others. However, Nye Tian's current strength was indeed enough for him to look down on Tian Zhuowei. Get out of the way, Tian Zhuowei. Nye Tian wants to enter the Arctic snow mountain, Huairu said coldly at that moment. Since Tian Zhuowei had already revealed his identity, he naturally would not be polite anymore. Get out of the way? Tian Zhuowei smiled coldly and looked at Huairu with contempt. Do you think that's possible? What do you mean? Huairu's old face turned ugly. It was obvious that Tian Zhuowei did not want Nye Tian to enter the Arctic snow mountain. Professor Hua, I admit that you have a high position in the academy. However, the Arctic snow mountain has already sealed off the mountain. We are guarding this place and not allowing anyone to enter. This is our duty. Tian Zhuowei responded with a cold smile, his posture arrogant and provocative. Huairu's expression turned even uglier. How could he not tell that Tian Zhuowei was deliberately making things difficult for him? This entrance is controlled by our Holy Soul Academy. Can't Nye Tian, a student of Godly Soul Academy, enter? Huairu's face froze and he growled in a low voice. Sure. The corner of Tian Zhuowei's mouth twitched as he said, as long as you have the permission of Dean Guigu or Vice Dean Tian, I will let you in. You. Huairu's expression froze, and he was rendered speechless. So you're saying that we can't enter without permission? Nye Tian took a step forward and asked. Yes. Tian Zhuowei nodded heavily extremely arrogant. What if I insist on entering? Nie Tianling sneered, his eyes filled with coldness. What? Do you want to fight us? Tianjue looked at Nie Tian and couldn't help sneering. You want to force your way in? You're just a fifth-order half-saint trash? He didn't take Nie Tian seriously at all, and in fact, he hoped that Nie Tian would make a move first. As long as Nie Tian made the first move, he wouldn't have to worry about anything. Young Master Tian, what if a fifth-order half-saint trash like me can defeat you? Nie Tian wasn't angry, and the corner of his mouth twitched as he asked indifferently. Humph. Tianjue smiled Nie Tian cold. Nie Tian, as long as you can defeat me, I won't stop you, and I'll personally send you into the Arctic snow mountain. Okay. Nie Tian's eyes flickered. He had been waiting for these words from Tianjue. The corner of his mouth twitched, and he said with a faint smile, Come on. Let me, a fifth-grade half-saint, have a taste of your strength. Tianjue's eyes trembled when he saw Nie Tian's move. He didn't expect that Nie Tian really wanted to fight him. A fifth-order half-saint challenging a fourth-order demi-saint? Wasn't that just courting death? Nie Tian, you're courting death. Don't blame me for it. Tianjue came to his senses in the next moment, and with a sneer, he took a step forward. His aura surged violently as he fully unleashed his fourth-order demi-saint cultivation, sweeping away the snow and wind around him. You're much stronger than your useless brother, but unfortunately, in my eyes, you can't even block a single strike of my sword. Nie Tianling smiled coldly, and his eyes flashed with coldness. Between him and Tianjue, there was indeed someone who was courting death, but it wasn't him, but Tianjue. Courting death. Tianjue was completely infuriated. With a roar, he slammed his palm down, causing the void around him to tremble. The terrifying force of the palm condensed into a giant palm in the air, pressing down on Nie Tian. Nie Tian stood where he was without a single ripple in his eyes. Only the corner of his mouth twitched slightly, curling into a cold, disdainful smile. Boom! In the next moment, his body moved, and sword will was released from all over his body. An enormous sword force shot up into the sky, making him look like a huge sword that stood between the heavens and the earth. At that moment, Tianjue felt a faint sense of unease. His eyes narrowed, and he couldn't help but look horrified. He didn't expect Nie Tian's sword aura to be so powerful. 8 Baron Sword Slash. In the next moment, Nie Tian's mouth twitched and he murmured. Starry Heavenly Slash was suddenly thrust out, and the sword will condensed in the air. The shadow of the sword howled like a dragon, and it was incomparably violent. Boom! Boom! Then, the palm and the sword collided, and the void shook violently. The giant shadow of the palm was forcibly cut apart by the sword shadow. Boom! In the air, the sword shadow suddenly exploded with terrifying power, and it slammed down on Tianjue. No! Tianjue's eyes trembled, and he screamed. But unfortunately, it was too late. Bang! A dull thud was heard in the air, and Tianjue was directly sent flying, drawing a bloody line in the air, and then smashed into a giant ice block beside him. When the other black-clothed cultivator saw this scene, his expression suddenly changed. After he sucked in a breath of cold air, his entire body froze. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he would never have believed that a rank 5 demi-saint martial artist could seriously injure a rank 4 demi-saint with a single sword strike. Moreover, looking at Nie Tian's calm face, it seemed that he hadn't even used his full strength. He really couldn't believe that a rank 5 demi-saint could be so strong. Hua Iru watched the scene from the side, and his eyes could not help but tremble. He knew that Nie Tian was strong, far stronger than other martial artists of the same level, but he didn't expect Nie Tian to be so strong. Could even be called abnormal. How is this possible? Tianjue crawled up, and his eyes looked at Nie Tian in horror. He no longer had the arrogance he had before, and it was replaced by shock and fear. At the moment, he was so badly injured that it was difficult for him to even stand. The power of Nie Tion's sword strike just now was too strong, and it was beyond his imagination. What he didn't know was that Nie Tion did not use his full strength, or he would have been reduced to ashes. "Young Master Tion, I'm going into the mountain. There's no need for you to send me off." Nie Tion didn't answer Tianjuo, but smiled faintly, and his calm tone was filled with intense mockery. Chapter 29:45. When Tianjuo saw Nie Tion step into the Arctic ice mountain, his face darkened and he growled. He did say that if Nie Tion defeated him, he would let Nie Tion enter the mountain and send him off personally. However, when Nie Tion really wanted to enter the mountain, he changed his mind. No matter how Tianjuo roared, Nie Tion didn't pay any attention to him, and continued to walk in. The other black-clothed martial artist stood to the side and stared blankly, not daring to stop Nie Tion. Boom, boom, boom. However, just as Nie Tion took a few steps, more than a dozen figures in black appeared in the void. Each of them had a fierce look on their face, and they stared at him with murderous eyes. Huh! When Nie Tion saw these people, he could not help but narrow his eyes. He was just wondering why only Tianjuo and Tianjuo were guarding the entrance of the Arctic ice mountain. It turned out that the real experts were hiding in the void. These figures in black were all pseudo-sages. Each of them had a strong and terrifying aura. This is bad. Huairu's face stiffened when he saw this scene from the outside. "Teachers, this kid trespassed into the Arctic ice mountain and injured me. Hurry up and kill him." At this moment, Tianjuo shouted and pointed at Nie Tion. Nie Tion's face stiffened and it was very ugly. This Tianjuo was obviously using these men in black to kill him. "The Arctic ice mountain has been sealed. Please go back." However, these martial artists in black did not listen to Tianjuo. One of them said in a cold and deep voice. Tikyur one Nie Tion frowned, but he did not move. "Retreat." That black-clothed martial artist roared in a low voice. However, Nie Tion still stood in the same spot and had no intention of retreating. "The Arctic ice mountain doesn't allow anyone to enter. If you don't back off, don't blame us for being impolite." The other black-clothed martial artist's eyes were gloomy and cold, killing intent surged out. "What if I don't retreat?" Nie Tion frowned. He lifted his head to look at the black-clothed cultivator and asked coldly. "Die." A cold light surged in the eyes of the black-clothed martial artist as he spoke in a cold voice. Boom, boom, boom. Just as he finished speaking, more than 10 black-clothed cultivators moved at the same time. Their auras surged wildly, releasing a terrifying aura. It was obvious that if Nie Tion did not retreat, they would really attack. Wait. However, at this moment, a deep voice rang out. When the 10-odd black-clad cultivators heard this voice, their expressions changed at the same time. Then, they withdrew their auras. When Nie Tion heard this voice, he couldn't help but frown in surprise. He was no stranger to this voice. He suddenly turned around and saw a gray-clothed elder standing beside Huairu. "Grandfather!" Tianjuo shouted excitedly when he saw the gray-clothed elder. This gray-clothed elder, who suddenly appeared, was none other than the deputy dean of the Holy Soul Academy, Tianjuo's grandfather, Tianyu. Nie Tion was no stranger to Tianyu. He had met the latter before. When Huairu saw Tianyu suddenly appear, his old face became even uglier. He knew that Tianyu was a person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Nie Tion killed his grandson, Tianjuan, and Nie Tion's father injured him not long ago. Now that he was here, how could he let Nie Tion enter the Arctic ice mountain? "Brother Hua, what's going on?" Tianyu's expression was gloomy. It was impossible to tell whether he was happy or angry. He glanced at Nie Tion, then looked at Huairu and asked, Brother Tian, I want Nye Tian to enter the Arctic ice mountain in advance to find something for me. Hua Xian calmed down and said with a faint smile. Unexpectedly, Tian Yu nodded and didn't say much. At this moment, Tian Zhuowei walked over and stared at Nye Tian viciously. Grandfather, I didn't let this kid enter the mountain, but he barged in and injured me. Shut up. Tian Yu glared at Tian Zhuowei and reprimanded him. Grandfather, Tian Zhuowei was stunned and froze on the spot. He did not know what was going on. Why was Tian Yu reprimanding him? Brother Hua, since it's what you're looking for, of course you can. Then, Tian Yu smiled faintly and said to the black-clothed men, Let him in. The black-clothed martial artists were stunned. After coming to their senses, they retreated. They could not understand why Tian Yu would let Nye Tian enter the mountain. Nye Tian injured Tian Zhuowei. Deputy Dean Tian, thank you very much. Nye Tian's brows furrowed, also somewhat unable to figure it out. But he still smiled faintly and gave his thanks. Then, he strode into the Arctic ice mountain, his figure disappearing very quickly. Huairu's brows furrowed. Looking at Nye Tian's disappearing back view, there was a faint, uneasy premonition in his heart. He already understood at this time why Tian Yu wanted to let Nye Tian enter the mountain. Tian Yu wanted to borrow the hands of other forces to eliminate Nye Tian. Although Nye Tian had injured Tian Zhuowei, it was not a big deal. No matter how Tian Yu pursued it, it was also impossible to kill Nye Tian. But letting Nye Tian enter the Arctic ice mountain was different. As long as Nye Tian encountered people from other forces, he would be in great danger. After all, Nye Tian only had the strength of a Tier 5 half-sage. Any powerhouse that appeared could kill him very easily. Brother Hua, people from other forces will definitely send people into the ice mountain to investigate. If Nye Tian encounters these, he will likely be in danger. Tian Yu looked at the place where Nye Tian's figure disappeared and said with a faint smile. He saying this was clearly reminding Huairu that the latter made a wrong decision. Nye Tian entered the Arctic ice mountain in advance and was destined to never return. Huairu's gaze sharpened slightly. He glanced at Tian Yu and did not say anything. At the same time, in the Arctic ice mountain, Nye Tian's figure sprinted wildly, like a snow fox in the snow-filled land, his speed very fast. After a while, he came outside an ice mountain valley before slowing down. Nye Tian, we are now searching in the periphery of the snow mountain. That sacred world seed must be in the hinterland of the snow mountain. We must not approach there now. At this time, Fat Cat's voice sounded, reminding Nye Tian. After the sacred world seed was formed, it would be accompanied by a powerful protective array. That was a place full of danger. Nye Tian must not approach it. Nye Tian agreed. His purpose of entering the Arctic ice mountain in advance was to search for items of ice and fire, not for the sacred world seed. Next, Nye Tian began searching in the periphery of the snow mountain. But the Arctic ice mountain was too big. Wanting to find something was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Soon, 5 days passed. Nye Tian found nothing. He did not even encounter people from other forces. It's not a solution to keep searching like this. It seems that we still have to enter the hinterland of the extreme cold. Nye Tian frowned and said in a deep voice. He felt that the chances of finding items of ice and fire in the hinterland of the Arctic ice mountain would be higher. As he spoke, he prepared to set off for the interior of the ice mountain. Roar! However, at this time, a vigorous, angry roar came from afar. It was extremely violent. Nye Tian's gaze sharpened slightly. Then, he almost sensed something. His expression suddenly changed as he turned to look at the sky behind him. In the sky, a colossal beast that was thousands of meters tall stood there like a mountain. It stood upright and its aura was as vast as the sea. This colossal beast was snow-white and looked like a giant lion. And the center of its forehead was actually a fiery red, faintly surging with a blazing aura. Chapter 2946. Nye Tian narrowed his eyes as he stared at the scene in the sky. He did not expect the person fighting against the gigantic beast to be a woman. Although he was very far away from the woman and could only see her silhouette, he could tell that she was a beautiful woman. He was curious as to why the woman would appear here alone. Icy flame snow chilin. Just as Nye Tian was feeling bewildered, the fat little cat's voice echoed out. I can't believe this kind of ancient beast would appear in a realm. It's indeed an icy flame snow chilin. Judging from its size, it should be a cub, Ghost Emperor said. Upon hearing the Ghost Emperor's words, Nye Tian's eyes widened and his face stiffened. Cubs! The gigantic white beast was more than 1,000 meters long. It was a cub. It was hard to imagine how big an adult icy flame snow chilin would be. Roar! At that moment, the icy flame snow chilin roared furiously. Its gigantic body was like a snowy mountain as it unleashed a powerful energy wave that spread across the sky. So strong! Nye Tian's eyes narrowed when he sensed the energy fluctuations, and he was shocked. He did not expect the icy flame snow chilin to be so powerful. He estimated that the icy flame snow chilin's combat strength was comparable to a pseudo-sacred realm expert. Most importantly, the icy flame snow chilin was only a cub. Humph! The woman in blue chuckled when she saw the icy flame snow chilin's roar. Her eyes were filled with coldness as she raised her hand. A small vortex appeared on her palm. In the next moment, she suddenly thrust out her palm, and the vortex whistled out. It suddenly expanded in the air, turning into a hurricane that was almost 10,000 meters wide. It was like a giant devouring beast, and it pressed down on the ice flame snow chilin. Boom boom boom! Heaven and earth roared as the strong force of the tornado was released. The wind and snow in the sky turned into sharp blades. Roar! The icy flame snow chilin's body shook a little before it let out a deafening roar. Roar! In the next instant, its body actually shone brightly, and crimson flames instantly enveloped its body. Streaks of flames collided in the air, like the raging tongues of fire above a volcano. Suddenly, the surrounding space became hot, and the area within tens of thousands of meters became a furnace. Nye Tian's face sank when he saw this. He was shocked. He had clearly sensed an icy aura from the ice flame snow unicorn. However, the energy that the ice flame snow unicorn was releasing now was actually the power of fire. This was simply too strange. Could it be that the ice flame snow Kirin's body contained the power of both ice and fire? Roar! At this moment, the snow chilin let out another angry roar. Its huge body moved, and its 4 hooves stomped on the ground as it charged forward. Rumble! In the next instant, the giant white beast's body forcefully tunneled into the hurricane. This! Nye Tian's eyes narrowed in astonishment. The destructive power of the hurricane was so strong that it could instantly destroy a mountain range that was hundreds of thousands of meters tall. However, the ice flame snow Kirin had actually charged into it. Its body was so strong that it could be said to be abnormal. White-haired beast, you're courting death. The lady in blue's beautiful eyes narrowed slightly. She slapped her palm again, and another hurricane appeared, enveloping the snow Kirin. TQR 1 inch, oh no! Nye Tian's heart sank as he looked at the hurricane. He felt that the ice flame snow Kirin would definitely be crushed by the impact of the 2 hurricanes. Nye Tian, you've underestimated the ice flame snow Kirin. This is a primordial beast. Its body is so strong that it's even more terrifying than the golden giant dragon. Fat Cat chuckled as she guessed Nye Tian's worries. Nye Tian's expression changed slightly. He frowned and murmured, could it be that the hurricane can't kill the ice flame snow Kirin? Roar! Before he could finish his sentence, the ice flame snow Kirin let out a violent roar. Then, crimson flames gushed out from its gigantic body, forming huge pillars of fire that attacked the hurricane crazily. Boom boom boom! Suddenly, A terrifying roar resounded in the sky. Waves of powerful aura surged in the air. Bang! Just then, the ice flame snow Qilin moved and walked out of the hurricane. Behind it, the hurricane spiraled in the air. Finally, it couldn't take it anymore and exploded. Nie Tian's expression flickered with astonishment. So powerful! The ice flame snow Qirin's body was really abnormal. It had destroyed the violent hurricane just like that. Then, the crimson flames on the ice flame snow Qirin's body became even more violent. It waved its two gigantic front claws, and balls of flames shot out like sharp arrows towards the other hurricane. Boom! 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 The violent roar continued. Under the countless attacks of the flames, the hurricane finally could not withstand it and was slowly torn apart. The lady in blue retreated abruptly and steadied herself. Her delicate face revealed a trace of surprise. Obviously, she did not expect the ice flame snow Qirin to be so powerful. The strength of a white-furred beast like you has exceeded my expectations. Although the lady in blue was surprised, she did not panic. Instead, she laughed and her eyes were filled with excitement. Roar! At that moment, the ice flame snow Qirin let out a low roar. The crimson flames on its body became even more intense. Then, like a huge snowball on fire, it rushed towards the lady in blue. Watch out! Nie Tian's eyes suddenly trembled when he saw this scene, and he couldn't help but cry out in alarm. Boom! The ice flame snow Qirin's body was extremely powerful. Like a huge volcano, it rushed towards the lady in blue. Even a high-level pseudo-sage expert would not dare to take such a violent attack head-on. Good timing. I want to see how strong your beast body is. The lady in blue bellowed. Then, a long sword appeared in her hand. She stabbed the sword forward, and the shadow of the sword flew across the sky towards the ice flame snow Qirin. Bang! In the next instant, the gigantic sword descended, directly slashing the ice flame snow Qilin's body. A thunderous boom rang out in the air, followed by a huge shockwave that spread out in all directions, as if wanting to destroy everything in its path. As a result, Nie Tian was struck by a sense of oppression. He guessed that the lady in blue was very powerful. She was at least a fifth-rank pseudosage. In the next moment, the ice flame snow Qirin retreated 1,000 meters and the shadow of the sword collapsed. The ice flame snow Qirin was unharmed after taking a direct hit from the lady in blue. However, the lady in blue was able to block the ice flame snow Qirin's attack with just one sword. Her strength was not ordinary. The ice flame snow Qirin and the lady in blue were evenly matched. You white-furred beast, your strength is much stronger than I expected. It seems like I have to use the 1,000 silk wind blade to kill you. The lady in blue steadied herself and said in a low voice. Chapter 2947. The lady in blue stood high up in the sky. Her blue robe fluttered in the wind and snow, giving off a feeling of isolation. At this moment, she slowly raised the long sword in her hand and spun it in the air. Then, gusts of wind energy appeared, like silk and rain. Nie Tian stared at the lady in blue and his expression froze. He had never seen such a strange technique. Using the power of wind to condense silk like rain. This lady has some tricks up her sleeves. If this ice flame snow unicorn can't use the power of ice and fire at the same time, I'm afraid it'll be in danger, Fat Cat said. This ice flame snow unicorn is still young. It's already good enough that it can use the power of fire. I don't think it can even use ice and snow, let alone the power of ice and fire, Ghost Emperor said coldly. So you're saying that the ice flame snow unicorn is going to be killed soon? Nie Tian frowned when he heard the conversation between Soul and Cat. Little Fat Cat and the Ghost Emperor fell silent at the same time, not saying anything more. Nie Tian couldn't help but look at the blue-clothed woman and thought, are you really that powerful? Roar. At this moment, the ice flame snow unicorn roared angrily and charged forward. The flames around its body were extremely violent. Tongues of fire rolled in the air as if they were going to burn everything. TQR 1-inch good timing. The lady in blue stood high up in the sky. Her lips twitched and she said cold, "I'll let you have a taste of the power of the 1,000 silk wind blades." As soon as she finished speaking, the lady in blue stabbed forward with her long sword. What appeared in the air was not a huge sword shadow, but a huge net of wind blades. The giant net was extremely large, and it was still expanding in midair, as if it was going to envelop everything. What a strange technique! Nie Tion's eyebrows furrowed in astonishment. The lady in blue's 1,000 silk wind blades were indeed terrifying. It seemed to be a combination of sword intent and some kind of bloodline power to form wind blades that then condensed into a net. In the next moment, the ice flame snow Cheelan's body collided directly with the 1,000 silk wind blades. The huge net of wind blades suddenly tightened, and the space around it was suddenly pulled taut, letting out a muffled groan. The ice flame snow unicorn was instantly enveloped by the 1,000 wind blade threads. The wind blade threads slowly tightened and trapped the ice flame snow unicorn. Roar! The ice flame snow Cheelan let out a thunderous roar as it was trapped in the net, causing the entire sky to tremble. Immediately after, its gigantic body began to attack in a frenzy. Waves of energy wreaked havoc in the space. However, the more it struggled, the tighter the 1,000 silk wind blades became. The lady in blue looked at the struggling ice flame snow unicorn and smiled cold. "Little bastard, do you think you can escape this time? In order to capture you, I even used the 1,000 silk wind blade. However, for the ice flame snow crystal, even if I have to pay 1,000 wind blades, I won't hesitate." Ice flame snow crystal? What's that? Nie Tion couldn't help but frown when he heard the lady in blue's words. It sounded like the ice flame snow crystal belonged to the ice flame snow unicorn. This woman wants the ice flame snow crystal. At this moment, the fat cat exclaimed with a panicked expression. "Fat, what is the ice flame snow crystal?" Nie Tion's eyes narrowed as he asked. "The ice flame snow crystal is the ice flame snow unicorn's beast core." The fat cat said in a deep voice, "This ice flame snow unicorn is only a cub. If the ice flame snow crystal is extracted from its body, it will die for sure. This is probably the last primordial beast. It will be a pity if it dies just like that." "Fat, should I save it?" Nie Tion's eyes flickered when he heard the fat cat's words. "Save it?" The fat cat asked in return. "That lady in blue is an 8th-rank pseudo-saint. Even the ice flame snow unicorn was captured by her. Are you a match for her?" Nie Tion's face darkened, unable to say anything. So this lady in blue was an 8th-rank pseudo-saint. No wonder she was so strong. Roar! At this moment, the ice flame snow unicorn was still roaring, but its voice was getting more and more miserable. As the ice flame snow unicorn struggled, the 1,000 wind blades tightened. The extremely tough wind blades actually penetrated the ice flame snow unicorn's body. Bloody wounds appeared on the ice flame snow unicorn's body. Blood gushed out continuously and instantly dyed its body red. Nie Tion couldn't help but be moved when he saw this. This scene was just too tragic. However, the blue-clothed woman's lips curled into a cold smile as she watched from the side. It was obvious that she was waiting for the ice flame snow unicorn to die under the 1,000 wind blades. This woman is so cruel. The fat cat frowned. She could have killed the ice flame snow unicorn quickly, but she chose not to. Instead, she waited for it to slowly die. Nie Tion's eyes narrowed as he couldn't help but say, "Vicious indeed." The lady in blue was indeed cruel. The ice flame snow unicorn was already powerless to resist, but she refused to give it a quick death. After a while, the ice flame snow unicorn slowly stopped struggling. Its huge body was already a bloody mess. Even its bones could be seen. It was a tragic sight. "Little fellow, have you had enough? Then I won't hold back." The lady in blue smiled and walked forward when she sensed the ice flame snow unicorn's aura. She wanted the ice flame snow crystal of the snow unicorn. Roar! However, at this moment, the ice flame snow unicorn suddenly let out a low roar. It raised its huge claws and slapped at the lady in blue. Huh! The lady in blue was shocked. Her exquisite face froze. Bang! In the next moment, she was sent flying by the ice flame snow unicorn's huge paw before she could react. Her body drew a bloody trail in the air. The sudden turn of events caused Nye Tian's eyes to widen, and his expression to flicker. He didn't expect the dying ice flame snow unicorn to suddenly explode with such terrifying power. This ice flame snow unicorn is very intelligent. It actually tore open a gap in the 1,000 silk wind blade and pretended to be in a state of near death. Then, it waited for the woman in blue to get close to it before delivering the fatal blow. Little Fat Cat exclaimed in surprise and excitement. The ice flame snow unicorn's performance was indeed beyond his expectations. "You white-furred animal, you tricked me!" The lady in blue roared as she steadied herself. Her body was covered in blood. She was obviously severely injured. The slap just now was completely out of her expectations. She was caught off guard. Fortunately, the ice flame snow unicorn was also severely injured. Otherwise, it would have killed the lady in blue with one slap. Arg! The ice flame snow unicorn growled. Its aura became even weaker. It had used up the last of its strength in that slap. Now, it could only wait for death. Chapter 29:48. Swoosh! A sharp sword shadow appeared in the sky and accurately pierced towards the snow cheelin's forehead. If the sword landed, the snow cheelin would die for sure. Boom! At the moment of life and death, a sword shadow appeared in the void and came crashing down, blocking the fatal sword. The sudden turn of events caused the lady in blue to frown. Her expression was very ugly. Her pair of cold eyes stared at the silver-haired man not far away. At this time, it was Nye Tian who had saved the snow cheelin with his sword. However, when she saw Nye Tian's face clearly, her expression became somewhat strange. "TQR 1-inch, who are you?" The blue-robed woman's eyes darkened as she asked coldly. Instead of answering the blue-robed woman's question, Nye Tian smiled and said in a clear voice, "I saved this ice flame snow cheelin." The lady in blue frowned when she heard Nye Tian's words and said coldly, "Brat, you think too highly of yourself. Do you think you can rob me with your strength of a 5th-grade half-sage?" Apparently, the blue-robed woman believed that Nye Tian had shown up at this moment because he wanted to take the ice flame snow cheelin's ice flame crystal from her. "I admit that you are strong, but the snow cheelin's palm has injured your yuan meridian, right?" Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, "You might be able to kill me if you forcefully used your strength, but your martial physique will be more seriously injured. What's more troublesome is that it might threaten your martial Dao foundation. Can you afford to pay such a heavy price?" Nye Tian's smile became even more provocative as he looked at the lady in blue proudly. The lady in blue didn't speak immediately, but her expression clearly stiffened. She didn't expect Nye Tian to be able to tell that she was seriously injured. Nye Tian was obviously threatening her, but it was also the truth. If the blue-clothed woman insisted on killing Nye Tian, her martial body would definitely be severely injured. She wanted the ice flame snow crystal because she wanted to use its power to break through to the rank 9 pseudo-sage. However, if she forcefully made a move when her yuan meridian was injured, it would be extremely harmful to her martial body. If that was the case, even if she killed Nye Tian and obtained the ice flame snow crystal, it might not be able to make up for the injuries to her martial body. "Do you want to do something that's not worth it?" Nye Tian saw that the woman in blue was hesitating, so he said with a faint smile, "Nye Tian, Dugu was right. You really are a difficult character to deal with." The woman in blue looked at Nye Tian and cold said. She had actually called out Nye Tian's name. Nye Tian looked at the woman in blue, and his expression changed. It was strange that she knew him. But in the next moment, he thought of someone. Dark Knight's Dugu Kan. He guessed that the Dugu the woman in blue spoke of was Dugu Kan. Looks like you're from Dark Knight. Nie Tian's gaze focused as he smiled. Because he had ruined Dugukan's plans and caused the deaths of over a dozen world spiritists in Dark Knight had already placed him on the Dark Knight Sky slaughter list. Previously, at the Sea of Suffering Edge, Nie Tian had already encountered an assassin from Dark Knight, and that person had recognized him. This blue-clothed woman had recognized him, and even called him Dugu. Without a doubt, she was from Dark Knight. Nie Tian, you're indeed smart. The blue-clothed woman smiled cold. I'm Lan Wu, one of the 4 great elders of Dark Knight. Such a high status. Nie Tian's gaze focused as he smiled. No wonder you have the strength of a rank 8 pseudo-sage. This Lan Wu didn't look very old, but she had such a high status in Dark Knight. She was the same as Dugukan, one of the 4 great elders. Nie Tian, I can make a deal with you, he said. Lan Wu's beautiful eyes flickered as she said, as long as you let me take the Ice Flame Snow Crystal today, you and Dark Knight will no longer owe each other anything. You will no longer be on the Dark Knight slaughter list, and Dark Knight's assassins will no longer cause trouble for you. How about it? Nie Tian raised his brows. He didn't expect Lan Wu to say such a thing. At a time like this, as long as he left or watched with folded arms, the people of Dark Knight would no longer chase after him. That sort of deal sounded pretty good. At least, Nie Tian wouldn't lose anything. But with that, the young Ice Flame Snow Qilin would definitely die. Nie Tian, I know that you're soft-hearted and don't want to see an Ice Flame Snow Qilin die just like that. Seeing that Nie Tian wasn't speaking, Lan Wu laughed and said, but this Ice Flame Snow Qilin is heavily injured, and too much of my 1000-edged sword intent has seeped into its body, so you won't be able to save it. Soon, the Ice Flame Snow Qilin's internal organs, limbs, and meridians will be completely shattered by the 1000-edged sword intent. Are you willing to offend Dark Knight for a dead Ice Flame Snow Qilin? HM? Hearing Lan Wu's words, Nie Tian's expression darkened, and he sent his divine sense towards the Ice Flame Snow Qilin. His expression froze, and he was greatly shocked. Lan Wu was correct. There was too much 1000-edged sword intent within the Ice Flame Snow Qilin's body. Nie Tian could feel the berserk 1000-edged sword intent rampaging within the Ice Flame Snow Qilin's body, slowly tearing apart everything within. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before the Ice Flame Snow Qilin became a corpse. Nie Tian, this elder's suggestion will not harm you in any way. Are you not willing to agree? Lan Wu's expression darkened as she spoke again. Humph. Suddenly, Nie Tianling laughed twice, his expression extremely strange. Nie Tian, what are you laughing at? Seeing Nie Tian laugh strangely, Lan Wu couldn't help but frown as she asked. I'm laughing at your ignorance. Nie Tianling laughed coldly and said, Elder Lan, do you really think I'm a 3-year-old child? Do you think I'll believe your words? Furthermore, even if you keep your word, why would I make this deal with you? I'm certain that you won't dare to attack, so I'll make a deal with you. The Ice Flame Snow Crystal will be mine. Lan Wu's beautiful eyes suddenly shook, and her beautiful face evidently froze. She didn't think that Nie Tian would be so astute and see things so clearly. She indeed didn't plan on keeping her promise. How could an assassin like her, who had killed countless people, care about promises? So you're saying that you're going to fight this elder? Lan Wu laughed coldly and said, then let this elder see just what kind of ability a rank 5 half-saint like you has. After speaking, she took a step forward, and the aura around her body surged out. She was like a raging wolf that rolled through the air. When Nie Tian saw this, he laughed mockingly and said, Elder Lan is indeed ruthless. Even if you're going to injure yourself, you still want to kill a rank 5 half-saint like me. Stinking brat, you're courting death. Lan Wu roared in a low voice, then raised her arm and slammed out with her palm. The space suddenly tightened, and an extremely sharp blade of wind shot through the air towards Nie Tian. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he was quite shocked. Chapter 2949. High up in the sky, Lan Diaowu instantly attacked, and a blade of wind tore through the air towards Nie Tian. Nie Tian's gaze focused, and he instantly felt a bone-chilling coldness. He never thought that Lan Diaowu would be able to explode with such terrifying power even though her Yuan meridians were injured. Stinking brat, you're too arrogant. Even if this elder is injured, killing a 5th stage half-saint like you is as easy as flipping my hand. Lan Diaowu laughed coldly, and her eyes were extremely sinister. Is that so? Nie Tian's gaze focused, and with a low roar, his entire body surged with sword intent. He stabbed out with the starry heavenly slash, and the powerful sword image was like a dragon coming out of the abyss. Bang! In the next instant, the sword image and the blade of wind collided, and a muffled sound rang out in the air. Following this, the giant sword image paused in the air, and in the next instant it shattered. Pft! Nie Tian's gaze darkened, and his expression changed. Before he could even react, his shoulder was pierced by the blade of wind and blood gushed out. He took a few steps back before stabilizing his body, and with a shake of his body, he forced out the 1,000 blades sword intent that had seeped into his body. His face was slightly pale, but his eyes were still as sharp as ever. Lan Diaowu was indeed an 8th stage pseudo-saint powerhouse. She still had such strength even though her Yuan meridians were heavily injured. He's not dead? Lan Diaowu looked at Nie Tian, and her expression suddenly changed, and a trace of blood flowed out of the corner of her mouth. That blade of wind just now did not seem like anything special, but it contained a powerful sword intent, and even a high-level demi-saint powerhouse would be blasted into pieces by that blade of wind. However, even though Nie Tian only had the strength of a 5th stage half-saint, his martial body was still fine after being struck by that blade of wind, and he was even able to force out the 1,000 blades sword intent. This was something that Lan Diaowu had never imagined. It had to be said that she had underestimated Nie Tian's strength. Elder Lan, you are indeed very powerful, but do you still want to kill me in your current state? Nie Tian looked at Lan Diaowu and said with a cold smile. He could already sense that Lan Diaowu's Yuan meridians were even more injured, and if the latter continued to forcefully attack, it would be very dangerous. Little brat, don't you know? A skinny camel is still better than a horse. Pfft. Lan Diaowu screamed, but before she could finish speaking, she spat out a mouthful of blood. Pfft. Upon seeing this, Nie Tian let out a cold laugh and said, Elder Lan, it seems that a camel like you isn't as big as a horse. If you continue to attack, your Yuan meridians will probably shatter. Nie Tian's eyes became slightly, and her expression. Nie Tian's in Yi Diaowu was in. In Tian in Diaowu Tian in. Even if she died, she would have died. If she would become a and would die. If she would Tian in, and would become a. Furthermore, she sensed that there was a strange power inside of Nie Tian. Even if she made another move, she might not be able to kill Nie Tian. Leave. Lan Diaowu's expression was incredibly dark, but she still chose to leave. It was not worth risking her life for an ice flame snow crystal. Nie Tian, we'll wait and see. Lan Diaowu raised her head and looked at Nie Tian as she spoke coldly. Following this, her figure flashed as she left. Take your 1-inch Elder Lan, take care. I won't be sending you off. Nie Tian looked at Lan Diaowu's back as he calmly smiled. He would not chase after Lan Diaowu. After all, she was an 8th stage pseudo-saint expert. If she was forced into a corner, who knew what she would do? After Lan Diaowu left, Nie Tian immediately turned his attention to the ice flame snow unicorn. Oh no, this big guy probably won't survive. Nie Tian frowned as he sensed the ice flame snow Qilin's body. The ice flame snow Qilin had been injured by the 1,000 silk wind blades, and too much of the 1,000-edge sword intent had seeped into its body. Although its body was still intact, its meridians had been torn apart. Whoa! At this moment, the ice flame Snow Qilin suddenly let out a low roar, and tears began to flow out of the corners of its eyes. Nie Tian frowned as he muttered, "Is this big guy trying to tell me something? Nie Tian, look at the ice flame Snow Qilin's body." Just as Nie Tian was feeling confused, Fat Cat's voice suddenly sounded out as it cried out in surprise. Nie Tian's gaze trembled as he looked at the ice flame Snow Qilin's body. He discovered that there was a faint layer of icy blue energy circulating around the ice flame Snow Qilin's body. What's going on? Nie Tian was stunned and he couldn't help but frown. He could sense an extremely strong aura of ice from the icy blue energy. But wasn't the ice flame Snow Qilin releasing its fire aura just now? Nie Tian, the ice energy within the ice flame Snow Qilin's body, is about to awaken. Fat Cat exclaimed in joy. Nie Tian was slightly taken aback, and he didn't understand. The ice flame Snow Qilin is a primordial beast, and its body contains both the power of ice and fire. It's an extremely rare ice and fire beast. Fat Cat's eyes darkened as it said, "The ice flame Snow Qilin's growth usually awakens either the power of ice or the power of fire before awakening the other power. When the ice flame Snow Qilin grows to a certain extent, it can use both powers at the same time. If this ice flame Snow Qilin can use the power of ice and fire at the same time, then the woman in blue won't be its match. So that's how it is." Nie Tian's eyes flickered as he understood. However, his face darkened in the next moment and he said, "So what if the ice flame Snow Qilin awakens the power of ice? It's going to die anyway." "That's not necessarily true." Fat Cat chuckled and said, "When the ice flame Snow Qilin awakens its power, its life force will skyrocket. If it can absorb the power of the same element at this time, then it won't die." Power of the same element? Nie Tian was stunned at first, and then he said in shock, "Is it heavenly ice rheumatism?" The ice flame Snow Qilin was a ice and fire beast. The power of the same element as it, of course, was heavenly ice rheumatism. "That's right." Fat Cat nodded heavily. Nie Tian's face darkened and he said, "The ice flame Snow Qilin doesn't have much time left. Where am I going to find heavenly ice rheumatism?" "You don't need to look for it." Fat Cat chuckled, and it was actually very proud. "What do you mean?" Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and he looked puzzled. The ice flame Snow Qilin and heavenly ice rheumatism have the same element, so wherever there is an ice flame Snow Qilin, heavenly ice rheumatism will also be nearby. Fat Cat said with a smile. "You mean that the ice flame Snow Qilin knows where heavenly ice rheumatism can be found?" Nie Tian's eyes trembled, and it became very passionate. "That's right." Fat Cat nodded, and it was very excited. Nie Tian was very surprised, and then he looked at the ice flame Snow Qilin, and stared at its huge eyes. He immediately realized that the ice flame Snow Qilin was currently looking at a place on the ice mountain below. Nie Tian followed the ice flame Snow Qilin's line of sight, and saw a long and narrow valley. Heavenly ice rheumatism is in that valley? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly and he murmured. Chapter 2950. Nie Tian stared at the valley, his eyes blazing with passion. Nie Tian, let's go take a look at the valley. Fat Cat's voice rang out. Okay. Nie Tian replied, and a pair of astral wings appeared on his back. Astral energy gushed out from his body, and when his wings were fully extended, they spanned a few thousand meters. Hoo! He flapped his wings, and the gigantic ice flame Snow Qilin was swept up into the air. Moments later, Nie Tian brought the ice flame Snow Qilin into the valley. Woo! He carefully placed the ice flame Snow Qilin on the surface of the ice. The Snow Qilin let out a low roar of gratitude, and tears welled up in its eyes. This fellow is quite emotional. Nie Tian glanced at the ice flame Snow Qilin and laughed lightly. After which, he didn't waste any more time, and immediately walked towards the valley. The ice flame snow Kirin didn't have much time left, and he had to find the heavenly ice rheumatism as soon as possible. Very quickly, he arrived at the depths of the valley and saw a gigantic cave in the distance, which was covered in ice and snow. The cave was extremely wide, and the entrance was 1,000 meters wide. It was like a gigantic beast had opened its mouth. Nie Tian's silhouette flickered, and he directly entered the cave. It was extremely cold inside the cave, and there were huge icicles hanging from the walls and ceiling. The smaller ones were tens of meters long, and the bigger ones were hundreds of meters long. Nie Tian walked into the cave, and he could feel the coldness in the air getting colder and colder. Very quickly, he arrived at the end of the cave, and in front of him was a gigantic ice lake with a circumference of 10,000 meters. Could it be that the heavenly ice rheumatism is in this ice lake? Nie Tian looked around, and didn't discover anything. Finally, he fixed his gaze on the ice lake. Nie Tian, go down and take a look. Fat Cat was even more anxious than Nie Tian and urged. Okay. Nie Tian replied and drew in a deep breath. The ice lake was emitting cold air, and one could imagine how cold the surface of the lake was. Pooh! Nie Tian didn't hesitate, and directly stepped into the ice lake. In the blink of an eye, a bone-chilling coldness assaulted his entire body, causing him to shiver uncontrollably. Without any delay, he spread out his divine sense and carefully sensed his surroundings. A moment later, he sensed his surroundings within a radius of several thousand meters. Finding nothing, he could only head towards the depths of the lake. The deeper he swam to the bottom of the lake, the colder Nie Tian felt. That kind of cold power was too terrifying. Perhaps a martial artist below the half-step sage realm would be directly frozen into ice slag. The frozen lake was very deep. Nie Tian swam for several minutes before he finally reached the bottom. After he landed, he immediately sensed an unusual aura, causing his expression to freeze. It's in front. Fat Cat also sensed the same aura and shouted in surprise. Nie Tian's eyes flickered as he looked ahead. His figure flickered as he walked over. He quickly arrived at a canyon at the bottom of a lake. As soon as he stepped inside, the scene that greeted his eyes left him completely dumbfounded. The entire canyon at the bottom of the lake was filled with light blue light, sparkling like fire, transparent and clear. On the ground there was a layer of light blue light balls. From afar it looked like a layer of blue carpet. One light blue light ball after another covered the entire canyon. Each light ball was not big, about the size of a fist. However, if one were to carefully sense it, they seemed to contain a very terrifying power. Heavenly ice rheumatism. At this moment, Fat Cat let out a strange cry and shouted in surprise. This is heavenly ice rheumatism? Nie Tian was stunned and his face was blank. He didn't expect that these ice blue light balls were the heavenly ice rheumatism that he had been searching for so long. Yes. Fat Cat replied firmly, very sure of it. Nie Tian took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. He took a step forward, stretched out his palm, and held an ice blue light ball. At this moment, the ice blue light ball actually spread out on his palm layer by layer, like flower petals. At the center of the ball, there was a flower that looked like a flame in a frozen state. So this is heavenly ice rheumatism. Nie Tian looked at the heavenly ice rheumatism on his palm. After a long time, he finally calmed down and exclaimed. The petals of the heavenly ice rheumatism on his palm fell one by one, like flowing flames, while the flower in the center in the form of a flame was like ice. No wonder this strange flower was called heavenly ice rheumatism. Nie Tian, that ice flame snow unicorn can't hold on any longer. Hurry up and bring some heavenly ice rheumatism back. At this moment, Fat Cat reminded Nie Tian. Okay. Nie Tian agreed. He didn't stand on ceremony and immediately took thousands of heavenly ice rheumatism. He took almost half of the heavenly ice rheumatism in the entire valley. He didn't take everything because he guessed that this valley, including the ice lake, was the ice flame snow unicorn's territory. After taking the heavenly ice rheumatism, Nye Tian didn't waste any time and immediately left the ice lake. He quickly left the cave and came to the valley. Roar! However, at this moment, a deep roar rang in his ears. Huh! Nye Tian's gaze froze and his expression changed. This was the roar of the ice flame snow unicorn. He sprinted towards where the ice flame snow unicorn was. He was still in midair when he heard several voices. Ha ha ha, 19th young master, we're so lucky. We actually encountered a legendary primordial beast, the ice flame snow unicorn. Rumor has it that there are primordial beasts in the Arctic snow mountain. I didn't expect it to be true. Yeah, this ice flame snow unicorn is so big. It's probably very old. I wonder who injured the ice flame snow unicorn so badly. Who cares who it is? Anyway, this ice flame snow unicorn is about to die. Let's do a good deed and let it die a little more quickly. However, its ice flame snow crystals will belong to this young master. Hearing these voices, Nye Tian's face instantly darkened, and at the same time, he looked a little unsightly. Among these voices, there was one that he wasn't unfamiliar with. It was the Mu family's 19th young master, Murong Jiu, whom he met previously. At that time, Murong Jiu used despicable means to injure Wei Kong, but he was injured by Cher's sword. Nye Tian didn't think that he would actually encounter Murong Jiu here. He clearly remembered that Murong Jiu's strength was a level 7 half-sage. Moreover, he was an ice attribute cultivator. Right now, he was only a level 5 half-sage. It was almost impossible for him to fight against Murong Jiu. Murong Jiu and the others obviously wanted to obtain the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn's Ice Flame Snow Crystals. Nye Tian definitely wouldn't allow this to happen. TQR1 he had painstakingly saved the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn from Lan Diawu. How could he let it die at the hands of Murong Jiu and the others? I'll risk it. In the next moment, Nye Tian's eyes flashed as a heavenly ice rheumatism appeared in his hand. Nye Tian, what are you doing? When Fat Cat saw this, she suddenly reacted and couldn't help but cry out. It's time to increase my strength. The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched as a strange light flashed in his eyes. He said, Lulu, prepare to release the power of the Saint's Spirit Blood Yuan. PFFF. After speaking, he tilted his head back and directly swallowed the heavenly ice rheumatism. Nye Tian, this. The little fat cat was taken aback and let out a strange cry. He already knew that Nye Tian wanted to swallow the heavenly ice rheumatism. He wanted to stop him, but he was a step too late. Chapter 29:51. Nye Tian directly swallowed the heavenly ice rheumatism and immediately felt an extremely violent power surge within his body, attacking his martial body's 100 meridians. Ah! In an instant, the pain spread throughout his body, and he couldn't help but roar like a wild beast. Nye Tian. Lulu was stunned for a moment before he reacted and growled. He had originally thought that Nye Tian would find an opportunity to slowly absorb the power of heavenly ice rheumatism. Who would have thought that Nye Tian would be so ferocious and swallow the heavenly ice rheumatism whole? Even if Nye Tian's martial body was strong, he couldn't play like this. Lulu. At this moment, Nye Tian let out a low roar. His entire face instantly became distorted under the intense pain, and his facial features became as ferocious as a wild beast. Heavenly ice rheumatism was an item that was the polar opposite of ice and fire. The power contained within it was unimaginable. Nye Tian directly swallowed the heavenly ice rheumatism, which was a huge impact on his martial body. At that moment, the power of the heavenly ice rheumatism was released. Nye Tian felt that the violent power in his body had actually transformed into two types of power. One was blazing like fire, while the other was cold like ice. QL11 in an instant, he felt as if he was in a place of ice and fire. The impact of this terrifying power was much more violent than when he was in the ice-fire lake. However, it was also fortunate that he had cultivated in the ice-fire lake before. His martial body was very adaptable to the impact of the two extremes of ice and fire. Nia Tian, hold on. At this time, Lulu calmed down and shouted. He then began to release the power of the Saint Spirit Blood Yuan. A white halo shone on Nia Tian's forehead, looking extremely strange. Boom! In the next instant, the powerful energy of the Saint Spirit Blood Yuan was released. It was like a broken dam, crazily rushing forward, incomparably frightening. Ah! At this moment, Nia Tian felt as if his entire body was about to be torn apart. The pain that seeped into his bones caused him to howl miserably. This kind of pain seemed to seep into every inch of his flesh, every bone, and every meridian. It was simply unbearable. If his temperament was slightly weaker, he would have fainted by now. However, at the same time, the aura around Nia Tian's body skyrocketed crazily. Waves of violent energy rushed into the void. It was extremely terrifying. Who is it? Just at this moment, several figures rushed over. When they saw Nia Tian in midair, they shouted. When these people saw Nia Tian's painful appearance, they couldn't help but stare blankly. They didn't know what was going on. Brat, it's you. Then, Morongjiu recognized Nia Tian and growled. His eyes were filled with coldness and murderous intent. 19th young master, you know this brat? The other members of the Mu clan couldn't help but look at Morongjiu and ask in surprise. It's this brat who killed Mu Fu. Morongjiu growled, not concealing the murderous intent in his heart. So it's him who killed our people from the Mu clan. A Mu clan martial artist sneered and said, 19th young master, let me kill this brat. Don't be anxious. Morongjiu saw that Nia Tian was in great pain, but he waved his hand to stop that person and said, What's wrong with this brat? Why is he in so much pain? Moreover, his aura is constantly skyrocketing. Could it be that he consumed a high-grade Yuan burst pill? At this moment, Nia Tian's strength was skyrocketing, and he was in great pain. There was a violent force rushing through his body, which was a sign of consuming the Yuan burst pill. 19th young master, this brat definitely consumed the Yuan burst pill. We should kill him now. Otherwise, it will be troublesome if his strength increases too much. A Mu clan martial artist looked at Nia Tian and reminded Morongjiu. Do it. Morongjiu's eyes darkened, and he growled to the person beside him. He knew that Nia Tian's strength was strange. If he really relied on the Yuan burst pill to increase his strength, he might not be easy to deal with. Therefore, it was better to kill Nia Tian as soon as possible, lest more trouble arose. Little bastard, die for me. In the next moment, a Mu clan martial artist spoke in a cold tone. His figure moved, and he violently slapped out with his palm. The terrifying palm's shadow was like a huge mountain, pressing down on Nia Tian. Nia Tian was in midair. His eyes were as red as a wild beast's, but the corner of his mouth suddenly twitched. Human sword slashes the stars. In an instant, the star's heaven slash appeared in his hand. With a roar, he directly slashed out with his sword. Boom! Bang! Sword intent surged, and the sword shadow whistled out. Where the sword light flew, it descended on the huge palm shadow. The void suddenly trembled, and the huge palm instantly collapsed. In the next moment, the sword shadow whizzed past, and the Mu clan martial artist did not even have time to scream before he was drowned by the sword shadow and died on the spot. The Mu clan martial artists below were stunned by the scene in front of them. They all gasped, and their eyes could not help but tremble as they looked at Nia Tian. The Mu clan martial artist who attacked just now had the strength of a second-stage demi-saint. How could he be killed by Nia Tian with a single slash? And Nia Tian was clearly just a sixth-stage demi-saint. Sixth-stage demi-saint. Murongjio was also shocked, and then he growled, and his expression became extremely ugly. When he met Nye Tian not long ago, the latter was still a third-stage demi-saint. How could Nye Tian have the cultivation of a sixth-stage demi-saint in just a few days? Even if Nye Tian took the Yuan burst pill, he could not have become so strong. Murongjio had seen with his own eyes that when Nye Tian was a third-stage demi-saint, he had killed Mu Fu, a first-stage demi-saint, with a single slash. Therefore, it was not surprising that Nye Tian could kill a second-stage demi-saint with a single slash now that he was a sixth-stage demi-saint. But the weirdest thing was that Nye Tian's strength was still skyrocketing. It was as if there was an inexhaustible abyss of power within Nye Tian's body, and he was constantly absorbing it. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and kill him! Murongjio immediately calmed down and growled. The other Mu clan martial artists reacted, and their faces darkened as a dozen of them moved at the same time, striking at the same time. Boom! 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 In an instant, countless violent forces appeared in the air, piercing through the air and blasting towards Nye Tian. The weakest of the Mu clan martial artists was a first-stage demi-saint, and the strongest were fourth-stage demi-saints. When they attacked at the same time, they could threaten an advanced demi-saint. But right now, Nye Tian was standing in the air like a berserk beast, his entire body's aura skyrocketing. Blood devours the heavens! Just as the endless attacks were about to land, Nye Tian slashed out with the starry heavenly slash in his hand. Sword will and blood chi surged in the air, and a blood-colored sword silhouette that was over 10,000 meters long appeared. Like a dragon in the 9 heavens, it rolled over with a crushing momentum. The dozen Mu clan martial artists could not help but feel a terrible pressure in an instant, and their faces could not help but change. Boom! In the very next moment, the blood-colored sword silhouette exploded with unstoppable power. A terrible rumble echoed in the air, as the violent attacks were directly drowned out by the sword silhouette. Bang, bang, bang! Then, the sword silhouette fell, and the dozen figures were sent flying. Even when they were still in the air, their bodies could no longer withstand the impact of the sword will, and they were directly shattered into bloody light.